Good evening and welcome to our June 13th, 2022 regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners for the Town of Matthews. I'm Mayor John Higdon. I'm very proud of myself because I put this dark jacket on in 2 rooms that were painted in my house and didn't get any paint. I don't think didn't get any paint on it. So well, if you see me with a weird stripe on my back, that's what happened. I'd like to start with some invitations. It's going to be a long night. It is. To my left and your right is Commissioner Renee Garner. We have Commissioner Larry Whitley, Mayor Pro Tem Ken McCool, our town manager Becky Hawk, our town attorney Charles Buckley, Commissioner Mark DeFano, Commissioner Gina Hoover, Commissioner John Urban, our town clerk Lori Canapino, our planning director Jay Camp, and our communications coordinator Maureen Keith. I'd like to start with tonight with invocation with Commissioner Hoover.
If you would please pray with me. Lord, your word says, when 2 or 3 gather in your name, you are in the midst. Tonight, we ask that you protect our men and women in the military and our first responders. As a town board, we have been given a great responsibility, and we ask for your guidance and wisdom. And for the families who are currently suffering in Texas, we pray that you give them comfort and peace that passes all understanding. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I'm going to start by reading quite a few proclamations tonight. It's Proclamation Month, apparently. So we're going to start by recognizing Pride Month, LGBTQ and Pride Month. Whereas the town of Matthews cherishes the value and dignity of each person and appreciates the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And whereas all are welcome in the town of Matthews, and every family in any shape deserves a place to call home where they are safe, happy, and supported by friends and neighbors. And whereas the town of Matthews denounces prejudice and discrimination based on age, gender identity, gender expression, race, color, religion, marital status, national origin, sexual orientation, or physical attributes as an affront to our fundamental principles. And whereas the town of Matthews appreciates the cultural, civic, and economic contributions of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, plus, LGBTQ plus community, which strengthen our social welfare. And whereas Pride Month began in June of 1969 on the 1-year anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising in New York City after LGBTQ plus and allied friends rose up and fought against police harassment and discriminatory laws that have since been declared unconstitutional. And where it is imperative that young people in our community, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, feel valued, safe, empowered, and supported by their peers and community leaders. And whereas despite being marginalized, LGBTQ plus people continue to celebrate authenticity, acceptance, and love. Therefore, we do hereby proclaim June as LGBTQ plus Pride Month in the town of Matthews and urge residents to recognize the contributions made by members of the LGBTQ plus community and to actively promote the principles of equality, liberty, and justice. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the great town of Matthews to be affixed this 13th day of June, 2022. So I believe we have Natisha Rivera Patrick on virtual online. Would you like to say a few words, Natisha?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, for letting me say a few words.
We can't hear you.
Uh-oh. Hold on. Bear with me. Can you hear me now?
A little bit. We're trying to adjust the volume. Hold on one second.
Okay. Testing, testing.
Go ahead and give it a shot.
Can you hear me better now?
Not very well. Hold on. Try one more time.
How about now?
That's a little better. Just speak loudly and we'll go with that.
Okay, I only have a few words. I just was thanking you, Mr. Mayor, and the commissioners for allowing me to say a few words tonight. As many of you are aware, I serve as the chair for the Cultural Diversity Committee for the town of Matthews, and we just wanted to, I just wanted to be on today in support of this proclamation. And Pride Month honors the resilience of LGBTQ+ people who are fighting to live authentically and freely, acknowledging those who are deserving of dignity, respect, and support. Pride Month allows us to educate public audiences on the LGBTQ+ community and to celebrate their contributions to society. And I know you're going to also talk about Juneteenth, and so I'll just use the floor now while I have it. And on Juneteenth, we recommit ourselves to the work of equity, equality, inclusion, and justice. We celebrate the centuries of struggle, courage, and hope that have brought us to where we are today. The celebration of Juneteenth reminds each of us of the precious promise of freedom, equality, and opportunity, which are at the core of the American dream. So I invite each one of you to make a difference where you can and when you can, because together we can do so much more. And so thank you for the work that you're doing to help move everyone in Matthews forward.
Thank you very much. I'll go ahead now and read the recognition of Juneteenth Independence Day. Whereas Juneteenth, also known as Juneteenth Independence Day, Emancipation Day, Emancipation Celebration, and Freedom Day, is the oldest African-American holiday observed in the United States. It commemorates the emancipation of those enslaved in the United States. And whereas Juneteenth commemorates the day freedom was proclaimed to all slaves in the South by Union General Granger on June 19, 1865, more than 2.5 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation by President Abraham Lincoln. And whereas on September 22nd, 1862, President Lincoln issued the celebrated Emancipation Proclamation, warning the rebellious Confederate states that he would declare their slaves forever free if those states did not return to the Union by January 1st, 1863. Enforcement of the Emancipation Proclamation occurred only in the Confederate states that were under Army control. And whereas prior to the end of the Civil War on January 31st, 1865, Congress passed the 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution, which abolished slavery throughout the United States and its territories. Texas, as a part of the Confederacy, was resistant to the Emancipation Proclamation. And on June 18, 1865, Union troops arrived at Galveston, Texas to take possession of the state and enforce the emancipation of its slaves. Spontaneous celebrations erupted throughout the country when the African Americans learned of their freedom, and the following day, June 19th, became known as Juneteenth. And whereas Juneteenth commemorates African American freedom and emphasizes education and achievement, it is a day marked with celebrations, guest speakers, picnics, and family gatherings. It is a true time of reflection and rejoicing. It is a time for assessment, self-improvement, and for planning for the future. Therefore, we do hereby proclaim June 19 as Juneteenth annually and call upon the citizens of Matthews to join in celebrating Juneteenth as a day to honor and reflect on the significant role that African Americans have played in the history of the United States and how they have enriched society through their steadfast commitment to promoting unity and equality. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the great seal of the town of Matthews to be affixed this 13th day of June, 2022. So, thank you. We'll move on to our next proclamation. Going to recognize July as Park and Recreation Month. So here I will read yet another proclamation. Whereas Parks and Recreation is an integral part of the communities throughout the country, including the state of North Carolina and the town of Matthews, and whereas Parks and Recreation promotes health and wellness, improving the physical and mental health of people who live near parks, and whereas Parks and Recreation promotes time spent in nature, which positively impacts mental health by increasing cognitive performance and well-being and alleviating illnesses such as depression, attention deficit disorders, and Alzheimer's. And whereas Parks and Recreation encourages physical activities by providing space for popular sports, hiking trails, swimming pools, and many other activities designed to promote lifestyles. And whereas Park and Recreation programming and education activities such as out-of-school time programming, youth sports, and environmental education are critical to childhood development. And whereas Parks and Recreation increases a community's economic prosperity through increased property taxes, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas Parks and Recreation is fundamental to the environmental well-being of our state. And whereas Parks and Recreation is essential and adaptable infrastructure that makes our communities resilient in the face of natural disasters. Whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our state and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas local parks in North Carolina generated over $6 billion in economic activity and provided over 37,000 jobs, ranking North Carolina as 10th in the nation based on 2019 data. And whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, whereas the town of Matthews recognized the benefits derived from Parks and Recreation resources, now therefore be it resolved by John F. Higdon that July is recognized as Park and Recreation Month in the town of Matthews. And I truly like to ask Corey to come forward. You want to say a few words? Corey King, our Parks and Rec Director. And Corey does an outstanding job. And I live along one of our popular greenways and near Squirrel Lake Park. And I can tell you that our parks are extremely well utilized. There are a lot of sweaty kids out there today, I can tell you. Yeah. Thank you so much. We're gonna take a photo. I'm sure Corey really wants a picture with me, so. Little tiny space to sign my name on here, so we're gonna maybe do another one. These are truly exciting times for our parks. As Corey's well aware, we've added significantly to our park inventory in the last few years, and that's very exciting. And I appreciate Corey's willingness to take on more. He loves it. You know, more parks, the better. So we'd like it. We're going to move on to agenda item number 7, present the Pollinator Week proclamation. So this one's a little shorter. Whereas pollinator species such as birds and insects are essential partners of farmers and ranchers in producing much of our food supply, and whereas pollination plays a vital role in the health of our national forests and grasslands, which provide forage, fish, and wildlife, timber, water, mineral resources, and recreational opportunities, as well as enhanced economic development opportunities for communities. And whereas pollinator species provide significant environmental benefits that are necessary for maintaining healthy, biodiverse ecosystems, and whereas the state of North Carolina has managed wildlife habitats and public lands such as forests and grasslands for decades, and whereas the state of North Carolina provides producers with conservation assistance to promote wise conservation stewardship, including the protection and maintenance of pollinators and their habitats on working lands and wildlands, and whereas the town of Matthews is committed to the management of landscapes, parks, and public land to protect and enhance pollinators, and encourages businesses, developers, and residents to promote wise conservation stewardship in landscaping, including the protection of pollinators and maintenance of pollinator habitats. Now therefore be it resolved that the town of Matthews does hereby proclaim the week of June 20th through the 26th, 2022 as Pollinator Week, and urges all citizens to recognize its observance. In witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the town of Matthews to be affixed this 13th day of June, 2022. And I believe we have Ms. Gretchen Reed. There you are. I'd like to say a few words.
I'd love to. Thank you.
Perfect.
All right, I'll try to make this brief. First, thank you to the mayor and all the commissioners for your continued support. I thought it'd be interesting to remind us that it's been 8 years since we first got the designation as Bee City USA. We were the 5th in the nation, and now there's over 300 cities and campuses with this affiliation. And similar to Corey, we think that Pollinator Week is really year-round, and we appreciate the town's continued support of all the practices of which you just shared. As far as just a few things to highlight for this National Pollinator Week is, you can find out most of them on our Facebook page. I actually have a flyer out on the table out here with the QR code, so you can get the fast link to the Facebook page where we will be highlighting different articles, fun ways to get out into nature and appreciate our parks, with highlighting some of those different pollinator gardens that we have throughout town. And then downstairs in the library, there will also be a display for you or your children or others just to see a nice overview of the impact of pollination worldwide and locally.
Thank you. And I'm sure you also want a keepsake photo with me. So
I know, yeah, I need that stool, but I forgot it.
few of you may know that in my spare time, which I don't have much of, I'm also a beekeeper. So I have a hive at the community garden at Parcel Park and one in my backyard, and they're both doing pretty well so far. And I would like to recognize a couple other citizens that we have in town. Martha and Will Kraus do an outstanding job of maintaining our pollinator garden near Matthews United Methodist Church. And if you haven't been out there, it's really a phenomenal garden, and they spend a lot of time keeping it up and weeding it and planting flowers there. So hats off to Martha and Will Kraus as well. All right, I think I'm done for proclamations. So we'll, but agenda item number 8, Mr. Town Manager, do we have anything to be added to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, one item we would like to add to new business, discussing the possibility of a dedication ceremony for a plaque that recognizes the Matthews Community Club that has been installed at the community center.
Okay, thank you. We'll add that as item 14C. Next, we're going to move on to agenda item number 9, public comment. We'll remind everybody, if you're here to speak about a zoning issue, you can speak during the zoning portion of our meeting and not during the public comment. Anyone who is registered in advance will speak first, and after that, anyone in the audience who wishes to speak may do so. So I'll start by calling the folks that have signed up. We first have Richard Roscon.
Thank you, Mayor and the Commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. I own a small shopping center that's located at 1905 Rice Road Extension, and there's another street that parallels to it called East Point. For many years, we've had an issue about parking there. There are no signs to indicate what parking restrictions there could be. If I may, I have some pictures that I'd like to present. On the first picture, the cars, the 3 cars and the vehicle that's back there have been parked there since April the 12th. That's when I started locating it. I rode by today and still there. So those 4 vehicles have been there for 2 months and a day. As you can see, there are other pictures of other vehicles that are parking there. I really don't have an issue about the parking. My issue is parking overnight. These vehicles come in, and what they do is sometimes they leave their own cars. So when they bring their trucks or vehicles they want to leave there, they take those cars, and that it's detrimental to our shopping center. All my tenants have complained about it. What I would like you guys to consider is putting up signs that say either, well, really not no parking, but just no overnight parking. And thank you so much for allowing me to speak to you.
Thank you, sir. I saw our town manager busily taking notes, so someone from staff will get back to you.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we have Lisa Klein.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Klein, and I'm running for School Board District 5 for CMS. My career has been one of service. I have nearly 40 years of educational experience with 29 plus in CMS. I've been a teacher, a curriculum lead, and an administrator, but most importantly, I was a parent for 15 years with both of my children attending CMS schools. You have been represented by a great leader in Sean Strain, but through redistricting by CMS, part of Matthews is now in District 5. If elected, I plan to continue Sean's strong representation of Matthews. Your issues will become my issues. I will come to your meetings. I'll give you a rundown of what's occurring and affecting Matthews. I want to be your eyes and ears on the school board so that the town of Matthews will continue to be heard. One of my priorities is accountability. Our school system is dysfunctional, you know that. Students are being lost daily to private schools, charter schools, and dropping out. The board needs to restore communication and respect to teachers while closing the learning gap and keeping academic performance a priority. CMS is losing teachers daily. Currently, there are over 1,000 vacancies in CMS that we know of today, or they know of. Teacher morale is low. They're overworked, underpaid, not respected, nor heard. So the board needs to be accountable to the staff, parents, and students, and also providing unbiased teaching in a safe environment. And I'm committed to providing safety to our students. Your town has always been a leader in providing safety for their students. They provided school resource officers on the elementary school level. I propose and want to increase campus security associates on all levels. With more trusted adults in our schools, we should see a decrease in violent behavior so that parents and children will not live in fear. Our children can focus on learning because they will be safe. Finally, the district must prepare our students to be college and career ready so that they can compete not just in CMS, but statewide and nationally. And right now there's very little trust between the board and the community. And building that trust is crucial to me as well as everyone else. Too many times, parents and students and teachers have asked for help only to receive silence from the district and the board. Matthews and Charlotte needs leaders who are willing to speak with the community and work with them to solve problems as they develop. I want to be that person for you. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Ms. Klein. Next, we have Mary Callie, but I believe you wanted to speak on the Williams Creek.
Yes, do you want me to wait till the zoning portion?
Yes. Dawn Lillard or
Yes, I
Lillard?
want to wait also.
Okay, great. Is anybody else in our audience care to make a public comment tonight? Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, we made a mistake there. Ms. Callie, you can speak. Speak now, because it's actually a decision, not a hearing, so.
Oh, all right. Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. I wanted to speak again about the Williams Creek project and the ability to maybe revise the site plan so that the ingress and egress will be on Rice Road and not on Williams Road. I sent all of you the petition that we had signed last week. So perhaps we can discuss that tonight and see what we can do about this. I think in general, it's pretty comprehensive what I had noted. The traffic issue, it's the stress that would be placed on the Williams Creek entrance. And I think it's something that all of the neighbors that we had spoken with are very highly concerned about, as well as the construction of it as well, and the time it's going to take, and the stress on the community with that as well. So I don't know how much longer we can talk about this issue, if a decision needs to be made tonight, or can this be an ongoing discussion until all of us are heard on this project?
There will be some additional discussion this evening.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Your next, I'm sorry, is your last name Lillard or Lillard? Lillard, okay. There's an R and N. Gotcha.
Yes, I'm Dawn Lillard. I am here in support of Mary and her petition. I'm a signer of the petition. I'm a resident of Dunwood Hills, have lived there since 2005 and have seen the area change a good bit in that time. A lot of development is going on now on Sam Newell Road with multiple housing projects on that road, which are increasing the traffic tremendously on Sam Newell, making it very difficult to turn from Williams Road left onto Sam Newell Road as it is right now with the housing that we have in that area. So I truly do support Mary's suggestion that if the possibility of flipping the arrangement of the new development on Williams Road is possible, I would like that to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lillard. Now, would anyone else in the audience like to make a public comment? Approach the podium and.
The public hearing is later tonight, so you might want to.
You'll have an opportunity to speak.
I'd like to address it simply because I have to believe I can't be. I wanted to say something about.
I'm sorry if you have to wait for the public hearing. That's the rules. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much.
All right. If no one else in the room would care to make a public comment, those in the Zoom audience can use Zoom's raise hand feature. If you're a desktop or mobile device, you can click raise hand. In the webinar controls, you'll be recognized by the name listed in your Zoom window. Maureen, do we have anybody that's indicated they would like to speak on Zoom? Okay. Move on to agenda item number 10, recess a regular meeting for public hearings and applications to amend the Unified Development Ordinance and Land Use Map of the Town of Matthews. We have instituted recently a new time limit for public hearings. Public hearings will be held until 10 p.m. if necessary. If any public hearing hasn't been opened by 10 p.m., it'll be continued to July 11th, 2022. I'd like to now ask Jay to introduce the planning board members in attendance.
Recess for
Oh,
public.
sorry, let's make that motion.
So moved.
Have a second.
Second.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Urban. All in favor? All opposed? That passed unanimously. Now we are in the public hearing phase. Jay, can you introduce the planning board now?
Glad to. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Here with us from our planning board in person are our chair, Mike Foster, and our vice chair, Natasha Edwards. Also joining us remotely via Zoom are Jonathan Clayton, Tom Dorsey, Jim Johnson, Howie Labner, Sarah Walker, and Doug Rose.
Thank you. Move on to item 10A, zoning application 2022-750, Lefkis Properties to change the zoning from I-1 to I-2 CD on that certain property designated as 552 West Charles Street and further designated as tax parcel 193-25149. Address that one.
Yeah, we've received a request to withdraw from the applicant as a recently approved text amendment satisfied the concerns they had.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a motion to withdraw?
Let's make that motion with withdrawal request of 2022-750.
Second. A motion by Commissioner Urban, second by Mayor Pro Tem McCool. All in favor? All opposed, that passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll move on to item 10B, zoning application 2022-753, Marklin at Matthews to change the zoning from R15 to RVS on that certain property designated as 1748 Marklin Drive and further designated as tax parcel 215-09106. Mr. Hallman.
Thank you, Mayor. Right, so this is a continuation for the previous public hearing we had last month. Do we have a clicker where I can just kind of? Can you put it on full screen? Under view. And that didn't work. Okay, never mind. Right, so just as a quick refresher from last month, this is 1748 Marklin Drive. The property owner is the Leon Levine Foundation, and the applicant is Tri Point Homes.
Sorry, can you speak a little louder?
Yeah, no problem. The owner is Leon Levine Foundation, and the applicant is Tri Point Homes. The existing zoning on site is R15. The applicant is requesting the RVS zoning designation. Currently is a vacant property. The proposed use is single family attached subdivision. Next slide. This property is located adjacent to the 74-45 interchange. It only has access to Marklin Drive right now. It only abuts one other property. Next slide. As you can see, the property is vacant right now and is adjacent to a church and has a single family neighborhood across the street from it. Next slide. Currently on the street view, it is all natural planting areas with what looks like some utility strips along the front with water and electric. Next slide. So we did get the CMS Impact Statement. This was back when it was a proposal for 79 single family attached units. At that time, it would have added an additional 13 students. There would have been no percentage change. Next slide. Just to recap of the site summary, it is undeveloped. It's about 13.83 acres. There's no swim buffers, no floodplains, and 2/3 of the boundary are right away with the 74-45 interchange and Marklin Drive. And then there is a Duke Energy easement or right away along the southern border up against 45-74. Next slide. So the applicant did come back with a new site plan. This is a bit substantially different. Maureen, can you move the Zoom layer? Or Jay? Oh. So there is one unique property, or there's one unique property with this site plan. So these lots are actually, I guess, a reverse orientation. So typically with our streets, it's you have the street, you have a planting strip, and then you have the sidewalk. With these, the sidewalks on each lot are actually found on the opposite side of the home. So looking from the front, the orientation of the home, they're all facing inward. So the giant circular street actually serves as an alley. And the homes all front opposite of the alley. So in the center, we have a large central park. In the rear, there are some homes that look back into the stormwater BPM and some tree save area. And then there are homes that front Marklin as well as the entry street. Next slide. And then just to kind of highlight that one more time, we do have the cross section for Marklin Drive or Marklin. So it would be that planting strip, the sidewalk path, and then actual rear yards. And then you see this will be the cross section for the actual internal drive. So it would just be 2 10-foot lanes and curb and valley gutter. Next slide. So the applicant is attaching architectural elevations with this. So there will be 2 types of alley loaded 3-plex homes. These are farmhouse and modern farmhouse. There would be a white option and a dark blue navy option. Next slide. And they also provided a craftsman option for the 4-plexes. One thing that was not clear on the application, I know there's a few 5-plexes and 6-plexes inside the community. If these architectural elevations are going to be applied to those, we'd just like a note of it or clarification that there's going to be additional building elevations. Next slide. So since the previous hearing last month, they have lowered the count of residential homes down to 73 units. They've also added a note for HVAC systems not to be located in the front yard or the front setback. I believe they've added the National Wildlife Federation certification to the property. And they've also added a few additional flexible design standards. So with our flexible design standards, just as a reminder, that is a reduction in what we require. So the minimum lot sizes would go from 3,000 to 2,300 square feet. I believe one of the changes were the minimum rear yard was going to be reduced from 20 feet to 10 feet. That was to help accommodate the front rear porches. Initially, they were proposing a 5-foot deep porch, and now they're proposing an 8-foot deep porch. They are requesting that the alley be privately maintained. So they've included flexible design standards to remove the public street frontage requirement. The minimum side yard has also been reduced from 8 feet to 5 feet. Again, this is to accommodate the porch on the side. And they requested a maximum block length increase from 660 linear feet to 1,500 linear feet. Next slide. Again, just to recap the land use plan and policies, it does highlight this area around the 7445 interchange as requesting against low density housing in favor of more mid and medium and high density. And it does specifically call out RVS as an allowed and desirable land use. Next slide. However, with that in mind, I think the board should still be aware that what we're really doing is just looking to make sure that this project meets the purpose and intent behind the RVS zoning district. Just because the land use policy calls for it in that area doesn't mean we're necessarily obligated to give it that designation. Next slide. Just a few staff comments. So we do have a stormwater concept plan submitted now. We are working through that. The TIA has been submitted for another draft review. We did receive some initial comments on that. The TIA consultant for the town, they did forward some comments today, and they did note that there's nothing detrimental or that would significantly change the TIA as it is now. So we're still moving forward with that. We have received a landscaping plan and planning detail We have not had a chance to review that for accuracy with the code, however. And then just concerning like the large circular alley on site, staff would like to see some additional traffic calming installed on that. Just because with that just being a single straight long road, there are chances for some like people speeding, things like that. So any type of traffic calming we could get to help with the pedestrian friendliness of the street. And then as far as just some general terminology in the plan, because the homes are essentially reversed and face the rear of the lot, everything in our ordinance and our land use code, that all addresses the lot as being oriented towards the street, which in this case would be the alley. So for example, there are just some small things like in the flexible design standards that I mentioned earlier, they were requesting a front reduction of the front setback. By our ordinance, that would actually be the rear setback that they were requesting it from. The numbers generally add up to the same with what they're showing. It's just some little terminology changes. Additionally, we would like to see a little bit more connectivity to the site plan just on a pedestrian level. There are some areas where they're not showing sidewalk next to the street. And because of that, it can mess with the internal connectivity a little bit. Jay, if you go back to the site plan real fast, I think it's 3 slides back. Or forward 1 more or 2 more. Or no, you went past it. And then 1 more. There we go. So as you can see on the rear of the site plan, there is a single sidewalk that serves those properties. We would request that maybe extension be on the sides of the property as well to bring some pedestrian connectivity back up into the park area, not just the central sidewalk provided to the back. And then just given the flow of this, we would also recommend maybe possibly flipping that and doing something similar up here along Marklin, just to increase pedestrian connectivity. In terms of street calming, one possible method would maybe do a few bump outs right here, so that there's not as far as of a walk for the pedestrians as they're crossing the street. Just helps slow traffic down a little bit. And then possibly doing 2-sided parking on a few of the areas of the road. Again, just to help slow traffic down. And you can go back to the staff comments. Then our Public Works Department is still reviewing the use of using the alley versus designated street. So typically anything that's a major road through the development that serves the entire development would be considered a street. With use of an alleyway, it would create a substandard road. And because of that, public improvement variance may be required. Even though it is a private street, it still needs to be built to public standards. So we're still reviewing that. And then that concludes the staff update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the Board of Commissioners, and members of the Planning Board. I'm John Carmichael, and I'm here with Margaret Puckett from Tri-Point Homes and Spencer McNabb with BEG. Spencer's the engineer that's worked on the plan. We want to thank you, first of all, for the time you've given the applicant to make adjustments to the site plan and the building elevations in an effort to address comments that we received on May the 9th. We appreciate the time that you're giving to us, and we'll try to be really efficient here. Jay, does this advance or do I need to tell you? Okay, next slide. Y'all know where the site is. Darren went over that. Next slide. It's zoned R15, the site currently. Next slide. And the request is to rezone the site to RVS to accommodate up to 73 townhome units. It's a reduction of about 6 units from May 9. Next slide. This is the May 9 plan that we looked at. You can see the site was accessed from Marklin Drive. I'll just point out a couple of things. You had 6-unit buildings and a 5-unit building along Marklin Drive. I think part of the comments were that's too many units. We need a little more spacing between the buildings. Another comment we heard was more open space, more green space. And so what we've done is try to make those adjustments to address those comments. Next slide. Next slide. These are the townhome elevations that we shared with you on May the 9th. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. If I'm going too fast, tell me, please. Next slide. Okay, thanks, Scott. All right, June 13, 2022 plan. So this is the revised plan, and we really think it's a vast improvement, and we hope that folks on the board agree, and folks here with us tonight. The entry would still be from Marklin. This entry road here would have decorative pavement, so it creates a nice entry feature. You'll note here that you've got 2 3-unit buildings, the sides of 2 3-unit buildings that face Marklin. You've got a 4-unit building and then 3-unit buildings facing Marklin Drive. As Darren said, there would be a private alley that would serve the units in this development. You've got an over 1.5 acre central park, central green here that would contain walking paths and a covered open air structure in the center of the central green. The units here would face the entry drive, so the rears would be here. These units along Marklin would front Marklin, so as you travel down Marklin Drive, you'd see the fronts of these units. The units adjacent to the central park, the center green, would face the center green. So we think that'd be a really nice feature for the residents of this community whose units abut at the central green. And then these units here would face the tree save area, some open space here. In addition to, and then the BMP is there, of course, in the right-hand corner, lower right-hand corner. In addition to the central park, there's an open space area here, here, and here. So there's significantly more open space and tree save that's contained within this plan. And then next slide, we'll go to the elevations. So these are the townhome elevations. This is the farmhouse structure, and then this is that decorative pavement, that entry road into the site off of Marklin. The front, I want to make one clarification. The front porches would be 8 feet in depth. I've been doing this type of work for a long time. I don't think I've ever worked on a townhome project that has 8-foot deep front porches. They're usually narrower than that. The porches along the side, and we need to clarify this in the plan, would be 5 feet in depth, but the front porches would be 8 feet. And so this is a farmhouse style structure. There would be no vinyl siding in this community. Vinyl would be limited to windows, doors, garage doors, soffits, trim, and railing. So no vinyl siding would be employed. Next slide. And then this is the other side of that entry street here. This is the more craftsman style unit. That's the decorative pavement as you come in from Marklin. Next slide. And then these are the various elevations. Once again, this is the modern farmhouse threeplex with the 8-foot porch along the front, 5-foot porches on the side. Next slide. And then this is the side. The porch wraps around the side. You can see there's a lot of nice architectural detail along the sides of the unit. Next slide. And then these are the rears. Mark, what do you call the thing over the garage? Just an awning? Okay, but there's, we didn't want it to be a flat plane, so there'd be an awning over the garage. And then there would be windows and decorative hardware on the garage doors. Next slide. Then this is a different color of that modern farmhouse threeplex. Next slide. That's the side. Next slide. And then this is just another picture of the fourplex, the craftsman style. Next slide. And then this is the side, once again, the porch wraps around the side, and there's some architectural detail on the sides as well. And then that's the rear. And then the buildings with 5 units, the units would be similar to either the modern farmhouse or the modern craftsman. But we're not trying to rush through it, but I know you've seen these, and we want to be respectful of your time, and we're happy to answer any questions. Oh, I do want to point out, and I know Darren mentioned it, that Margaret's been in touch with the Hawk folks, the Habitat and Wildlife Keepers. So we've committed on the plan that this would be certified. I also failed to mention that, I do want to mention this. Any way you can speed back to the site plan? Sorry. I failed to point this out, but the prior plan had units that really went backed up to the church here, if you recall. And one thing that Tri-Point had committed to do to try to mitigate that somewhat was to put a 6-foot tall wooden screen fence here, as well as a buffer. Well, now the units have been pulled away, as you can see, but the fence remains, and the commitment to install green giant arborvitae trees remains as well. So I failed to mention that, but we're happy to answer any questions that you may have. Margaret, anything that you want to add? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Carmichael. I would like to commend the Tri-Point Homes for making an incredible improvement to what was initially proposed, and this is 1,000 times better than what was proposed initially. Are there any comments? Mayor Pro Tem McCool?
I got a few questions,
Sure.
so bear with me. First, this is on the site plan. The corner where Marklin has the big curve, is the land there brought down to grade with the road?
Yes, it'll be close in order to get a better site easement through there.
Because from what I'm looking at, that threeplex there looks pretty close to what will be there. I mean, I remember we were chatting when we met. We really concerned about that corner. We've got a lot of citizens concerned about that corner, so bringing that down will help. You don't believe that threeplex will impede on any sight lines for the drivers?
No, we do not. It's far enough back that it would not impede the sidelines.
Okay, and then my second question, if you can go to the rear elevations where the garages are. There's no back door. So if someone were to be visiting the house and park back there, how do they get to inside the house? You have to just leave your garage open, or?
It's a good question. With a 22-foot wide home, you really only have a garage door. There's actually not enough room to have a door on the side unless you have a wider unit. So it would be entering through your garage door as you're pulling in and out, or you're walking around the front to get inside the home. Widening the units would be the only solution. And we've tried to push and pull with density, keeping prices as affordable as we can while we add elements to architecture. We're trying to find that fine balance to make this project work.
Well, you said prices, so you led right to my next question. What's the starting price on these things?
These homes are going to be in the mid 400s. Pricing overall has remained about the same where we had anticipated it in our first public hearing. The units have actually gotten a little bit smaller. They're about 17 to 1900 square feet, but we're adding a lot of elements to these homes on the architecture side that we're trying to balance that price and cost equation.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Tufano?
Yes, excuse me, on the elevations where the single door is coming in, there appears to be just a covering. Is that also going to be a full porch? Can you go to a front elevation? Anyone? Yeah, see that, like that center one where it is, appears to be just a covering. Is that also going to be 8 feet in depth?
Yep, those interior units will also have the same porch depth. About 8 feet is what we're targeting for that. And yeah, will be consistent with the end units.
Yeah, because when you're doing a side shot of it, it did not appear that way. So that's the reason I was asking.
I figured that was going to be a question because they are staggered. So it
Yeah.
does two-dimensionally, it does not look like there's that same depth, but there will be
And-
8 feet.
And this may not be, this is not a question for you. And Jay, has there been any discussion with Public Works about putting traffic calming on each side of that Marklin curve? Anything at all? Any discussions or any talking about it at all that you know of?
Specifically to
In other words,
modify
that's,
the curvature of the road or create
no,
traffic calming?
that's a real dangerous curve, and a lot of people have actually gone off the road.
Ms.
And-
Savina Willard.
Yes,
maybe-
thank
maybe
you.
We'll address that.
Good evening. This Marklin is an NCDOT street, and they highly discourage traffic calming on all of their streets unless they're a neighborhood residential street, which this would be classified as a minor thoroughfare that because it parallels 74. So we haven't even engaged NCDOT in traffic calming. However, we know that that curve is on one of their safety project lists, and that was addressed in the traffic study. The petitioner could probably answer more about that if you would like to know more about their commitment to the curve.
Thank you.
And I do want to say in terms of interior traffic calming, we will work with planning and take care of that, include that on the plan.
Commissioner Urban.
The little things over the garage doors are called eyebrows. Just.
Yeah, that's great.
But anyway, so let me go through a list of few things. I do thank you for coming back to the table. I know we sat around in the conference room for a couple hours. I'm more. It's like up my nose. So I appreciate the reduction of the number of units, although it wasn't necessary, but to make the site plan work, that was great. I think the discussion of the architecture, the farmhouse and the craftsman is very indicative of the nature of the town. I think from the 20s and the 30s and older, which I like that compliment. I like the compliment also that Liberty down the street has a very similar architecture. So it's beginning to give identity to the area, and it's not as ubiquitous a design as elsewhere. So I did like that. I also like the fact that some of the house plans, especially the white rendition of that modern farmhouse, actually you could read it as a single family home or as multiples. So I mean, you can read it however you want to from that standpoint. I would definitely emphasize looking at the the planning department notes, very good comments on that. I'd hold that up. I think this goes to Ken's comment, building 14, 15, 16 shoved in that corner. I'm not sure if, if a car was to run off the road or whatever, would it become a target of the vehicle? I don't know, but I'd want to make sure, if anything, the big asterisk on this, barring design, barring, in and out egress, is the safety around that curve. I mean, if I had to give up something, I'd give up some of the design aesthetics, whatever, to make sure that curve was on target and we were improving the safety around that curve. I'd like to see, because the house is fronting Marklin and the elevations are showing them right on grade, eventually you'll have connectivity down that road where you'll have people walking from neighborhood to neighborhood. I'd like to see buildings 4 through 7, 8 through 10, 11 through 13 have raised porches, 2 or 3 steps.
So right now the plans require a 12-inch step, all of them.
So you're telling me every unit in here has 2 steps?
12 inches. It doesn't mention the number of steps.
Well, it'd be 2 6-inch steps. You're not going to take a leap of 12 inches.
Well, I don't know what a
3
step is,
4s, I
but-
suppose.
Well, the note says 12 inches.
Okay.
And that's a note that we've used like at other.
Oh, that's
things
well.
in Matthews.
I'm a visual guy. I'm looking at the elevations,
Right.
and I see everything was at grade with the customary 4-inch step.
Right.
So I want to make sure that it's not a 4-inch up to the patio, and then it's that 4-inch lip into the front door.
I mean,
Okay.
Can you? I'm gonna read exactly what.
Well, just don't worry about it. We could
Oh,
just
okay.
make sure we get that digested, because I know some say, oh, it's an elevated porch. Yeah, elevated 4 inches, and then there's another step of 4 inches into the house. It's not really an elevated porch. If anything, I'm worried about them along Marklin Drive to create that sense of public space,
Right.
semi-private and private space.
Yeah, you wouldn't want it at grade. For
I don't
sure.
want people on
Right.
grade with that. So anyway, let's see. No, I'd like to see a little bit more elaborate landscaping plan. It's a little, amorphous right at the moment, especially the fact that in the common green area, I can't quite tell, but it looks like you do have trees going around the perimeter. I'd like to see that more emphasized, because actually the more trees you plant, the more you increase the tree canopy. I think this is a very successful project because it's got stuff at the edges, but it's beginning to get that smattering of tree save in and around the rest of the building. So I compliment you on that as well. Let me make sure I have hit all my notes. So landscaping is very important. That is it. I do want to say though, at 73 units, you are at 5 dwelling units to an acre for a townhome project, which is actually on the low end. Townhomes are usually 7 to 9. So, you know, somehow you're making this all work and the density work, and it's more akin to a single family home aspect than it is more of a townhome density. So I appreciate that as well. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
How possible is it to be able to remove 14, 15, and 16 from that spot and take that out? And I think that would ease some of the concerns about that corner. Take away those 3 units.
Mr. McCool, respectfully, it will impact our project on a financial basis. If we remove those units, we certainly can look at it. But I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head and whether or not that's going to be financially viable for us to proceed.
With all due respect, it's a 70, I mean, there'll still be 70 units. I don't think it's going to bankrupt the project to take away 3 units or make it smaller. I don't know, but I think there's going to be a significant concern about this corner. We have heard it from citizens. I drove that corner 2 days ago, and it is dangerous as is. And so we want to make sure it's as safe as possible. And I think that would go a long way into showing goodwill to the community.
Thank you.
Mr. Garner.
Yes, I appreciate some of the changes that you've made to the aesthetics of it, and respectfully disagree with Commissioner Urban, surprisingly, using the word ubiquitous, that this design is not ubiquitous. I think that's the one thing that I hounded to the designers, is that this to me is a Chip and Joanne Gaines project. And we're seeing these farmhouses pop up all over the country. I was in Cary and had noticed that neighborhood after neighborhood was a white home with black trim farmhouse, modern farmhouse. And I feel like these are going to be the avocado green appliances of the future. But instead of harping on aesthetics, I would like to, for perspective of the board, we have 2,000 units coming before us, 2,000 residential units. Of those, we have 457 townhomes. And, you know, does this meet a need for Matthews? And we each have to individually answer that, and we'll answer it when it comes back up for a vote. We heard from somebody running for school board. We have of the projects in the hearing tonight and being voted on tonight, we could potentially add, let's see, about 70 students to CMS, 3 classrooms. We are also extending, voting on extending, I think, the mobile units. You know, so we can complain about the school board and dysfunction, but our role as commissioners is to keep in mind that balancing growth and the pressure that we put on our schools. So I just want to keep that in perspective when we look at these projects, that, you know, there are 457 townhomes that we will vote on that are somewhere in the queue. And well, and I didn't touch on the price point. We are not seeing projects that are coming in. It hurts me every time I hear a developer say that they're keeping their projects affordable at $400,000. You know, and I say this over and over and over again to the board, that if we lost our home, we would no longer live, our family could no longer live in Matthews. And as we're approving these projects, there's something in my heart that just is really painful, thinking that what we are approving can price out my 3rd generation family from the town that we've put roots down in. So thank you for letting me have a moment with my comments.
Any other comments from the board? Any comments from the planning board? Mr. Foster?
23 feet total. So you have a 2-foot valley curve. Oh, sorry. 23 feet total. So you have a 2-foot valley curve, 20 foot of asphalt, and then 1 foot concrete ribbon on the other side. Yes, there's parking on there, designated parking spots.
That's not included in the 23 feet, correct?
Correct. That's an addition.
Okay, 'cause I saw where, I think the fire department recommended parking on a single side. And I think maybe planning had stated that it would be okay to have parking on both sides in some areas.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something we'll have to work out. With,
It's
both of them.
tight.
Yeah.
Any way you look at it, it's really tight.
It's recessed, right?
Yeah, the parking's back in addition to that. So it's another 8 foot of designated parking in those areas you just pointed out.
And one question about the sidewalks. Do the sidewalks follow the alleys?
No, the sidewalks are more interior in general. They do go by the parking area, but they tend to move the pedestrians around the front of the homes rather than down the street.
Okay. The reason I ask, I can't see them at least easily where the sidewalks are.
Okay. Yeah, we'll clear that up.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions from the planning board? And I can't see them. So Marina, has anybody indicated they would like to ask a question? One thing that I appreciate about this development is that interior park, and to put it in perspective, the actual area of Stumptown Park that we use is about 1.7 acres. And so this is a park nearly the size of the useful area of Stumptown Park in a development, which is pretty rare these days. So I do appreciate that. Anybody in the audience care to make a comment or have a thought about this proposed development? Does anyone in our Zoom audience would like to make a comment? If they want to, they can use the raise hand feature in Zoom. If you're on desktop or mobile device, you can click the raise hand and webinar controls and you'll be recognized by the name listed in your Zoom window. Maureen, has anybody indicated they'd like to make a comment? All right, this application will be heard by the planning board on June 28th and come back to the Board of Commissioners on July 11th, or will be continued. Oh, never mind. Okay. Come back to our board on July 11th. All right, we'll move on to the next item.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Zoning application 2022-757, Towns of Hayden, to change the zoning from R9 and R15 to RVS on that certain property designated as 8900-9017 Ridgeview Road, 2000 through 2036 Hayden Way, 8923, 9001, 9009 Boyd Drive, and further designated as parcels 193-20404, 193-20424, 193-20403, 193-20425, 193-20419, 193-20422, 193-20421. Let's just say et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to read all this. Mr. Will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the board. This is application number 2022-757, Hayden Way Townhomes. This is the pre-public hearing staff analysis. As the mayor mentioned, there are a number of parcels involved with this project, and a number of applicants, a number of owners, and the applicant is Kinger Homes. The existing zoning is R9 and R15. They're proposing to change the zoning to RVS and SRN. The majority of these small parcels are vacant and wooded, but there are a few single-family homes that are existing in the neighborhood. The proposed is single family and townhomes. Again, they are looking to change the zoning from R9 and R15 to RVS and SRN for the purpose of constructing 7 single family homes and 91 townhomes. Next slide, please. So this gives you an idea of the project area. There are currently 28 parcels in this area that are included in the project area. And it is at the end of Hayden Way. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there are 28 parcels. 9 of them have single family homes. It's about 19 acres total. Lots were platted in 1955 and have only been partially developed. The roadways, including Hayden Way, Ridgeview Road, Boyd Drive, and Scenic Drive, were platted as public roadways, but have not been improved nor accepted by the town. Directly to the north is the city of Charlotte. That's that big, thick red line on the northern part of the plan. And fronting 74 are a number of businesses zoned B1 or BH. I can't remember which. Next slide, please. This is the original plat from 1955, just to give you an idea of the layout and how it has come to be. Next slide is the proposed 98. There's proposed 98 lots, which is about 5.17 units per acre, 7 single-family lots, 91 townhome units. Tree save provided is the required 8% of the project area. There is open space and a central green proposed. Parking spaces for guests are provided in the denser part of each area of the development. Each one single-family detached unit shall have minimum depth of a 6-foot covered porch. And again, the principal buildings may be used or may be built of a variety of building materials. Excuse me, I'm stumbling tonight. The building materials are as listed. Next slide, please. This is the northern part of the site plan. This is proposed to be RVS zoning, residential varied styles, to be 38 townhomes, I believe. And the next slide shows us the southern part of the proposed site plan, which is they're asking for the SRN zoning. And this shows the connection from Clare Drive to Sam Newell as well, and also the extension of Ridgeview Drive. The next slide is, next few slides, I should say, are elevations that are conceptual that have been provided by the applicant. They are garage loaded townhomes. And the next slide, I believe, has a couple of pictures for the single family homes on the left, on the right, and then some more conceptual visual of the townhomes on the left. The next slide is our CMS analysis. It's the development may add up to 19 students for schools in the area. And as we've heard, we have Min Hill Middle and Butler High are over capacity at this time. Crown Point Elementary is not. But this is data from CMS. And as we know, the schools are jam-packed around here. So the next slide is, this is a summary of the draft transportation impact analysis. Now, briefly, I won't read through all of the recommendations, but the at US 74 and Hayden Way, they are to provide a westbound turn lane with 100 feet of storage at the Hayden Way intersection. And then at Sam Newell and Clare Drive, it will be restricted to right in and right out. And then you'll be able to make a left-hand turn out of Clare, but you won't be able to make a left-hand turn from Sam Newell onto Clare. And then the next slide talks a little bit about our land use plan and adopted policies. And I really want to focus on number 3 here. It said the town should provide an array of housing types, densities, and locations. The town will continue to protect and maintain existing single-family neighborhoods, yet also consider residential redevelopment options when they are demonstrated as viable options. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. The next slide is staff comments and some outstanding issues. Went back and forth about the alley-loaded townhomes versus front-loaded. Alley-loaded, you lose your backyard, while front-loaded brings a lot of driveways up to the sidewalk and is less of an inviting pedestrian experience. And you get less of that front porch feel. New development of this type, we haven't seen too much of it before because it's integrated into an existing neighborhood. So it needs to be context sensitive and improve what is already existing. Central green, nice amenity for existing and proposed residents. It's not as large as the townhomes at Marklin, but it is centrally located in this project. Right now, I was looking at this and I said, well, what if we just left it alone and there's 25 lots that could be built upon within the project area. It's 28 lots total. 3 of those would have to be recombined because they're substandard or do not have road frontage, but there's the 28 lots. Some public works concern was that some of the roads do not intersect at 90-degree angles. And one thing I do not have listed on here is that we'll have to work out some of more of the on-street parking locations that are proposed in the site plan. That is the staff report for this rezoning application. I'll be happy to answer any questions that the board or may have at this time.
Commissioner Tufano.
I will. The proposed 98 lots, it says 5.17 units per acre. That comes out to approximately 9,000 square feet per unit, which is actually an R9. Is that not correct?
That is, well, that's, well, actually, I'm going to have to defer to the applicant to answer the question because I don't know what size the units are they are proposing for those townhomes. It is R9 right now. So that is something we can.
Yeah, I was a little confused why there was a change or request for change of zoning if the actual 5.17 per acre is actually an R9, is it not? Yeah.
Well, okay, that's okay. I understand. The layout is what is as of right.
It would the offsets and
yeah,
okay.
There is different amount of tree save, different amount of open space requirements, things like that.
Okay, that answered that. Thank you.
Okay, sorry for the delay.
No, actually, that was good. Thank you.
Any further questions from the elected board? Commissioner Garner.
I have a question and I feel like I should know this, but I couldn't tell with the maps I have. Part of what makes this appealing to me is the access to 74, but when, and my fingers are crossed, U2509 happens, some of the accesses on 74 are, I assume, being closed. I'm looking at Susan for it. And so what happens to those streets that sort of rely on access to 74?
That is a great question. And I will talk a little bit about U2509 and I will look at Susan if I need her help. U2509 has been substantially changed and broken it into little bits and pieces, as you probably are aware. So I'm not exactly sure what the impacts of the project would be in this site area. But I know that it has been dissected.
Susan.
Hello again. Thank you for the question. That is a great question. We've been through many different revisions with NCDOT on access to 74. And the last one we saw had both Hayden Way and Claire open. Now you're probably remembering a prior one where Hayden Way was cul-de-sac. But in anticipation that maybe some access points will be cut off, we see here that Claire Drive is shown being extended to Sam Newell. Not that we want to shove all the traffic to that point, but to provide options for the existing residents and future residents of this area to be able to get to where they want to go. Additionally, you might also remember our page south of this diagram that there is a proposed connecting East Point to Claire Drive, which would provide yet another opportunity for ingress and egress to this area. Did that sufficiently answer your question?
It does. Thank you. I couldn't tell by looking at the segment map, so that paints a better picture. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions from the board? Any questions from the planning board? The planning board. Maureen, do we have anybody online?
I believe the applicant is here and has a presentation as well.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm Paul Sagan and I represent Kinger Homes, Dinesh Kumar, and this is Travis Jingrau, who's our lead engineer. Some of these elevations have changed a little bit from what Rob provided. We updated this and sent it over earlier today. Next slide, please. Table of contents just showing the key partners, location proposal. Next slide, please. Next slide. The site location, one of the things we've targeted with this and as far as the upping of density has been the transit-oriented district of the future of this site, targeting 74, the development of the rail, the potential new commercial access, and the walkability to both transit and jobs for people coming into town. Next slide, please. Proposed development, when we talk about what we have on here, and starting to zoom in on my screen here. The petitioner is proposing 7 detached single-family homes along Boyd Road, adjacent to the current detached single-family, and additional 91 attached single-family homes of various units and various sizes and designs. By right, the approval for 4 units per acre, proposing 5.2 roughly. Commissioner Tefano, you asked what the change was there. We have to adjust for roads, BMPs, tree saves, and we've also got a large park, a little over an acre, and we've proposed almost 135% of the standard tree save to be in the neighborhood. So we've kept a lot of tree save in there throughout there to really kind of buffer the neighborhood. So that's really accommodated why this lot seemed bigger, but we're not as dense as we could be in that property. Preservation, we will look to preserve and replant throughout the site. As we said, we're targeting 135% of the required tree save amount. Transportation improvements, we commit to the transportation improvements, including the construction of ADA crosswalks and ramps, sidewalks along new proposed roads, road widening, road surfacing, additional ingress and egress at Sam Newell, and traffic calming devices and 4-way stops. As Susan spoke, we've been working with Susan quite a bit and NCDOT to connect Claire, connect Ridgeview, and find out what we can do with Hayden, because Hayden is going to be a real connection back towards 74 and the future of that rail system. Project density, by right, these 19 acres of both R9 and R15 allows approximately 76 units. Our rezoning increases density to 98, but also accommodates, as we mentioned, for new infrastructure, tree saves, community areas, and new connectivity routes. The increase in school attendance has been mentioned, but townhomes typically are driven a little more to starting families, beginning families. So we see that being more of an influx on the elementary school, which is the least populated school that's in the district. The development provides quality housing to enhance the range and styles of housing available in the area. And RVS and SRN developments are meant for higher density, and this site's proximity and location towards 74 and towards commercial really promotes that. As far as design and buffers, we've limited the number of units to building 5 per pod, variety of square footage and pricing and designs, cementitious siding, and a focus on pitch roofs, usable porches, and stoops. Next slide, please. Multiple iterations again. We've sidled this on the left side. If you look at plan left, that's a single family to align with the roads that are currently all single family. We then have townhomes on the right hand side. We have a centralized park. We've been asked to take a number of the driveways off that. We've shifted about another 30% of the driveways. We're probably about 60% off the main road as far as driveways, and we've shifted those all to private drives. So nothing. So Hayden only has a handful, I think 5 units that are coming out, and the same thing with Ridgeview. If you look planned south, about 9 or 10 units coming out. All the rest are going to be off the main roads. So everything's going to be privatized alley, and then we'll have a centralized park of a little over an acre, between an acre and an acre and a half. Again, targeting 135% of the standard tree safe. Next slide. This is just showing an overall survey. If we have some questions about surveying or anything like that, we can go through it. Next slide. Traffic improvements along Ridgeview. You'll see a traffic calming device. We worked with Susan, the city, at the town, and worked through how they want to do everything. We moved crosswalks. We moved the secondary drives off the street, widened roads where we needed to, and then created a traffic calming device down on the far right, which you can see. And then a little bit south in that plan. What is this referencing?
So south is Hayden, and as well the traffic improvements there. We've got four-way access or four-way stop signal there, and then just plan. I guess that'd be left there. We've got the on street parking, and then it comes to the alley point there, and yep, that.
You
So
guys
just
use a
working-
laser pointer maybe to point. where
Yeah,
you-
sorry,
that'd be a
it's
little
tough.
helpful.
We tried to squeeze it all in there. Travis walked through that.
Yeah, so that four-way stop location is right there. And then as well, we've got the on street parking. And then there's actually going to be a raised crosswalk as well, right there.
So we've gone through and worked with the town again on multiple traffic calming devices per all their direction, and have approved all that and committed to what they've requested as far as those traffic calming devices. Next slide, please. This is just showing a justification of how our buildings will sit, and we look to put a tree line. Usually we use giant green arborvitae. It's a very fast growing, dense, large tree, and we stagger that to kind of grow along that. And this will show our development on the right roughly to where development on the left will be, and show that buffer between them. Now this varies a little bit between, but this is only in reference to what would be planned left if you're looking at it where we're sidling a couple single family homes, because we just have a few townhomes on that side. Next slide. Some elevations. Next slide. These are some elevations with both front load and rear load garages, just showing a few different roof lines. We know this is always a process working through as far as what we like, and snout noses and different roof lines and everything like that. So we try and get that out in the separation of garages, and we're just trying to get those ideas out. We know the centralized park is a big thing, and sorry, Corey left, the dedication of the parks for July, but the park has become a main focus of the developments we're trying to get approved here in Matthews and work through, just because they're a good centralized focus. And now that we've turned the attached homes from front load to rear load, we need to have some of this open access to parks for families and places for people to go. Next slide. Project highlights, just kind of walking through them. 98 single family attached and detached homes for 19 acres. A diverse product, single family attached and detached homes, 3 to 4 bedroom, 2.5 to 3.5 bath, all with 2-car garages. Approximate square footage ranges from 17 to 2,400 square feet. Attached 2,200 to 2,800 square feet. Number of parking spots, 72 units will have 2-car garages and two-car driveways. 26 will just have 2-car garages. Some of those that we turned off the main road, you've got a little denser, so they'll have the 2-car garage. We've also managed to include 34 additional parking spots throughout the community. So, I mean, that's great parking for everybody to come around. We're at an average of just under 4 spots per unit throughout the development. Projected construction period, about 24 to 30 months. Projected average sales price, 400s to 500s. Commissioner Gardner, I know you had questions about values. It's an unknown for development when we get into land. And I don't mean that to escape that question. We just don't know soils, land, water, what we'll go through. We've got a couple different properties we're engineering and working on, and we go, here's our delta for what we think development will happen. It happens at $25,000 more a lot, and it has to go somewhere. So we'd love with our smaller units, not 1700s, to meet that high 300s. I know it's not unbelievably affordable, but that's about as affordable as housing can get these days. So we will target that. We just can't commit to it until we get through that land development. So I know that was a question of what you had in values before. Utilities, all standard utilities that we work through the city and county on. Next slide, please. Project timeline, working through the zoning as we know, trying to target through the summer. March 2023 for civil engineering completion. April, finishing on the site development through the site development will begin. Site development completion through the end of the year in December. First units delivered in the spring of 2024, and then a construction completion through June 2025. They won't be custom, so we'll build at a faster pace to move through the neighborhood and respect the community and get that moving along, because we have quite a few road improvements, improving Ridgeview, improving the Clare connection, improving Hayden, depending on the direction of NCDOT. So there's quite a bit of work there as well. And the rest is just market information, but we're open to any questions that you have.
Thank you, Commissioner Urban.
Take a deep breath, Paul.
Yeah, I'm fine, John.
So we just saw that last petition, and I can't help that everyone else in this country wants to design stuff that we have. They want to look like Matthews. I can't help that. Farmhouse, rural, bungalows. This one is nondescript and truly ubiquitous. Paul, you've brought to us so much better projects than this. I don't even, I have my notes. Let's just go through this. So your presentation was so technical. Where's the story that that tells me why I want to live here? Now, that's the first color piece that I saw in the site plan. So when I first saw the site plan in the black and white presentation that I had here, it's an awful site plan. I mean, it doesn't know what it wants to be. You got units facing one way, units facing another way. You're so and it's not personal, this is business here.
That's okay.
You're so disingenuous about that green park space that all your notes about everything else were covering the green space in the black and white diagram. And as a visual person, that tells me there was never any emphasis about that green space. It's a strange, chaotic site plan. The undisturbed open space, other than that green space, is relegated to the edges. You turned your back on the green, and you said you were already talking to the planning staff, so I didn't know that. But you got driveways facing the green, and that's just poor planning. There was a material note in there about vinyl. I think what you wanted to say was there's no vinyl unless you're making it soffit material or fascia or something like that.
Correct.
Some of your elevations show 6 units, but all your pads are at maximum 5. I have really mixed emotions on the elevations because, again, I'd rather have something that's indicative of what Matthews is from that standpoint. Planning department comments are spot on. Porch depth, the discussion about depth really doesn't matter because I'm not seeing anything here that relegates this community to talking about porches. Little stoops don't cut it. And then I think we had some elevations tonight that weren't in my packet, which began to show it. I would say that, if Commissioner McCool asks how expensive are these are definitely more expensive than the last petition from that standpoint. And so I guess the question is what does this project want to be? In my opinion, you got to start over. I mean, I could see cottages of probably equal density, single family home cottages, 0 lot line product being here that would have more of a sense of community in place. I could see townhome product here, but are you trying to design it as an urban edge townhome product or a city edge townhome product or a suburban townhome product? And we know to the south, there's a big development going to be developed there eventually. So what does it want to be? But right now I've got notes all over the place. My notes are just as scattered this whole presentation. It is unlike your past pieces that you brought to the table.
Thank you. So we'd love feedback. I mean, when we'd love the time to sit down and go through, I think we're pretty nimble on the development and the architecture and everything like that. What we've done in this revision, which is a multiple iteration, is kind of followed the direction we've been given to. We've actually moved our park, moved our driveways, moved our entrances per some direction we've received from planning and the town. So we've made those modifications per the direction
What
we've
if
been
you just
given.
had nice streetscape, like a single family home development, and you mixed in, a cottage with a townhome or something like that, and you just had Hometown USA, Ames Street, Charles Street, houses that line, street trees, a decent front yard, that kind of thing, and didn't have to worry about the green so much as long as you provided maybe a series of more pocket parks or something like that. But this it looks like it landed from Mars. I mean, and it doesn't relate to anything we have in Matthews. You really let me open up the barrels tonight. I feel
No,
better
I'd
now.
love to surprise you.
I feel much better now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Commissioner Urban, don't hold back.
Yeah, no.
I'm really restraining myself.
Yeah, we'll have to meet after. So yeah, we'd love the opportunity to sit down. And I mean, this is our first review of this. So we're happy to go over and just kind of say what the direction is. We've got a big site. We're open to a ton of tree save. We're trying to provide parks. We've moved things off the road. So we're very flexible in that. We just, we're taking the direction we've been giving and moving it around. And now we're bringing it to you and you're saying, well, that we don't love that direction. So now the next step is, take your direction and what you're giving us, and then take it with the direction we've been given, and try and find a happy medium to go through there. So, I mean, given the opportunity, we're okay for changes in architecture and design. We, it could be a small workshop kind of thing to kind of get us in that direction to speed us along, to answer things faster for you, versus coming back time and time again with hey, this isn't the right direction. So if that's an opportunity, we'd love to do that.
Commissioner Tufano?
I'm going to try to be as nice to you as Commissioner Urban
Perfect.
was,
Thank
but
you.
I'm having trouble. So he said everything I wanted to say, but the very first impression I got was that this was just a bunch of pigeonholes where people just come home at night and they walk into their pigeonhole. And I'm looking at these elevations. There's no porches. There's no sense of community. There's nothing. There's just absolutely nothing. And the elevations that we have in our packet are even worse than what you displayed. So thank you, Commissioner Urban, for saying all those things, because that's exactly what I was feeling also. But please make it look like a home.
Sure. Thank you.
All right.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool?
I agree with everything Commissioner Tufano and Commissioner Urban have said. I'll give you one compliment. You have a back door, which previous petitioner didn't have. So I'll give you something to be happy about tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Tufano. It doesn't, there's no sense of community. It doesn't feel like it would belong. We have some big developments that are getting redeveloped at that off of Sam Newell right off 74. So how can this be, interact with that? Yeah, I think if it needs to go back to the drawing board, it's all over the place. Yeah, I was kind of confused when I first saw it. I didn't expect this. It's pretty poor. So
We're happy to work on it.
Yeah.
Commissioner Garner?
I think they've made plenty of comments about the aesthetics of this project. I have some comments about transportation and echo some of the same comments I made before, that we have, with 457 townhome projects before us, we can be picky. I appreciate that you're adding to Crown Point, where we do have some space for students. Some of the smaller notes that the trees that you have mentioned and the previous petitioner mentioned, I don't see them on our tree list. So familiarize yourselves with the tree list before creating the landscaping schedule. It would be a shame to put in large, expensive trees and have a fungus take them all out. In part of your presentation, you mentioned being able to walk to jobs, but if your homes are $400,000, people are not walking to those jobs from their homes. You're not working as a cashier at Harris Teeter and buying a $400,000 home. I think part of what my hesitancy with this farmhouse design, and I'll direct this to Commissioner Urban, is I work on a farm and I'm saying to you that I cannot afford a farmhouse. It's frustrating. So, if you are expecting people to walk to jobs, then find a way to make this development have some accessible, attainable homes within it. I like that it's walkable to transit. I hope that there is an emphasis on that, that as a development, you can really take some creative ways to encourage future residents to use transit. And I think what each of the commissioners are asking you is, what are you bringing to Matthews? How are you building the community of Matthews? We have a lot of pride in our town. This seems to take advantage of our community rather than adding to it. And so when you do go back to the drawing board, I would heavily consider that.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
Any other comments from the elected officials?
I just want to say one thing. If you don't mind, Jay, flipping back to the survey real quick. I just want to point out a couple items on this layout here. Yeah, specifically right here. So we do have, real quick, Hayden Way, which extends through the site. And then from our side, I'll point out too, where we were extending it through to here. And then as well, Ridgeview actually comes down. This is already right-of-way property. We could certainly change a site plan around drastically, but because this is already existing right away, we'll have to have some talks, I guess, further with staff about what we can and can't do, I guess. Because that was playing, key important roles of how we had to lay this out. So just want to re-emphasize that. Thank you.
Are there any comments or questions from the planning board? Hey, would anyone in our audience, Sarah, I believe you wanted to make a comment. If you could come to the podium and state your name and address
Thank
and
you.
then make your comments. Go to the podium, please, sir.
Too old for this game. Not anybody at any time has mentioned my home right in the way of Ridgeview. I guess it doesn't matter. I've only been there 35 years. Anyway.
State your name, please.
Daniel Christopher Jackson. Okay. Thanks. Let's see. They call me Chris. Okay, so I'm Chris Jackson. I've been there since '87. I live only 3.5 acres between Boyd and Sam Newell, which is where Ridgeview goes through, almost through my bedroom. Thank you very much. Nobody wants to mention this. I left Charlotte to escape the noise of city Chevrolet, the PA system. I thought I was buying a large lot for the peace and quiet, not to develop or make money. It was only after I got 7 tax bills that I realized that there were 7 lots, of which one side is separated from the other by an imaginary road on a map made some 70 years ago. On the map, it showed as Ridgeview Road, which is not open on the map. I assume that was forever. Silly me, right? Now a developer wants to open it and also to open Clare Drive. Doing this will destroy my environment, for which I have contributed about $100,000 in property taxes. The road would be 50 feet from my bedroom. Opening Clare Drive will also ruin Boulevard Acres for most of the residents of the other 21 houses. Lawyers tell me that after more than 20 years, I have a right of way. I don't know what it's called, but it's based on Old English law, and I should know because I'm Old English, which may stop Ridgeview Road at my property line. The previous owner, Mrs. Outen, age 95, visited me lately, and she and her husband, who's now dead, created a path around the perimeter to allow them to feed their goats, ponies, and chickens. Another path leads to my barn, which would be the other side of Ridgeview. During the virtual meeting, actually a sales presentation, nothing was said about traffic. On the Matthews letter, which announced this meeting, still nothing was said about traffic. On the zoning change signs, which was supposed to be distributed throughout the neighborhood, still nothing about traffic. I visited the planning office several times, both to get information and once to tell them their signs were being taken down shortly after they were put up. Let's see, page 2, I'll be finished soon, and go home to bed. A day or two later, the signs were back up after I mentioned this, only to be taken down yet again and again a third time, and I kept putting them back up. Nobody else seemed to care. Of the 4 signs that were allocated to the 4 roads, Scenic Drive had no sign, Clare Drive had no sign, Boyd had 1 sign placed on an empty lot facing the street, not the traffic. So nobody would see that anyway. Who's looking over here when they drive? If you do, you have a crash. Hayden, however, had the other 3 signs, all bunched together down the dead end where nobody would see them. Oh, clever stuff, isn't it? Might actually, if any, few, if any, would see them, and I call that useless. Not really. It's obviously useful those who care more about making money than about the local residents. opening Clear Drive would provide a major cut through for traffic. I said from the shopping center, Northeast Parkway, Rice Road, although the other gentleman mentioned that they were going to cut off anybody coming north from going into Clear Drive, but still there'll be a bunch of cars going through there. Possibly hundreds of cars will use the cut through. Most of the residents might be forced to live with this. Can you? That's all.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Or anybody else in the audience like to make a comment? Ms. Callie? Ma'am, you can come line up behind her if you like and speak next.
Thank you. Hi, Mary Kelly again. Again, based on this other Kinger Homes project, as we see now, there'll be another 98 homes all dumping onto Sam Newell. We have Tennyson, which has 73. We have Northway Homes, which is also in development. There has been no proposed widening, as far as I know, of Sam Newell. There are no shoulders. Once again, right now, it can take you up to 15 minutes just to come out from Williams onto Sam Newell. If you get stuck between a mail truck and an Amazon truck, you could sit in traffic for hours. So I think there needs to be some consideration. If we are going to go through with these projects, what will happen with Sam Newell and widening of that road?
Thank you. Ma'am, please state your name.
My name is Hope Greer. I live on Boyd Drive. And there's a lot of mention about community. And unfortunately, it would seem that this particular proposed property does not have any community whatsoever. The current community is what, 21, maybe 28 homes. They have a nice, decent lot. They are friendly. I can state that when I moved into my home about 19 years ago, I was having issues with my lawnmower, and the neighbor across the street didn't know me, came up and assisted me. With 98 units, that is overkill for the town of Matthews. It's overkill for our little community. We help one another when needed. We may not know everyone's name, but we know when to assist you when needed. And with that proposed property and the traffic, and although they say traffic this, well, my son used to go to Crown Point, and I know that coming off of Margaret Wallace onto Sam Newell, it gets backed up during the hours of operation. And they say, oh, it's only going to increase Crown Point. It's going to increase everywhere. 98 homes, you can't tell me that it's only going to be about 20 or 30 students. It's going to be far more than that. And that's going to increase the traffic. You're going to be sitting at the light at Margaret Wallace and Sam Newell. That the patrol who's assisting or directing traffic is going to back up like it always does with the current level and the current population we have. My suggestion is, why don't you ask them to reduce the amount of townhomes, make it more cottage styles, more something that someone will feel welcome to come to, even if they walk to the transit. It is something that you would be proud of. I don't understand or see how increasing 98 units at the end of Hayden Way would want anyone, will welcome any type of community. Would you want that increased foot traffic? If you went to our neighborhood as we speak at this time, it is nice, serene, quiet. Add those units, it's going to increase the traffic side significantly. You've increased the number of homes 4 times than what it is. So we would have to take care and deal with the brunt of that. My neighbor, Mr. Jackson, indicated that you will be bunning up against his bedroom. Would you want someone driving in their car looking in your bedroom? I wouldn't. So why not halt this particular action? Because as you stated, you have 451 projects. This doesn't need to take place. We have a park. It is less than 2 miles. We have a greenway. It is less than 2 miles. I use it every day. Why do you need one in the middle of your neighborhood? I'm not saying it's not cute, because it is, but this isn't needed. Let's take advantage of the resources we have. Let's increase or improve our current community. If you want to add a few homes, fine, but 98 is far too many. And thank you both, or all of you, for listening.
Thank you. Would anyone else in our audience like to make a comment about this proposed rezoning? Anyone in our Zoom audience may make comments as well. If anyone wants to make comment on this item, use the raise hand feature in Zoom. If you're on a desktop or mobile device, click raise hand in the webinar controls. Maureen, do we have anybody indicating they'd like to make a comment? Based on the comments that came from the board and the public, I wonder if the developer would consider asking for a continuance instead of sending this to the planning board. Would you like to do that, Paul? Entertain a motion to continue this item. To continued to July 11th, 2022. Anybody like to make that motion? Okay. 11th.
Second.
A motion from Commissioner Tufano, second from Mayor Pro Tem McCool. Any further conversation, discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Okay, this item will be heard again by this board on July 11th. I'm sorry, you're opposed? Ms. Hoover's opposed. Okay, so it's 6-1 with Ms. Hoover voting no. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, zoning application 2022-752, Matthews Gateway Wingate, that change the zoning classification and changing conditions from R9 and MUD to a single MUD district on that certain property designated as 1205 East John Street near the I-45 interchange to accommodate a multi-use development with a maximum of 240,000 square feet of office space, retail, restaurant, and other commercial uses, a maximum of 150 hotel rooms, a maximum of 120 single-family attached dwelling units, and a maximum of 285 multifamily dwelling units, and further designated as tax parcels 215042-19-12 and -13. Mr. Will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you mentioned, this is a very large mixed-use project. The applicant has requested not to hold the public hearing this month and has requested to move the public hearing to July 11th, 2022. Project was advertised and posted, but surrounding property notices were not sent because of the request for continuation. Recommendation at this time is to open the public hearing and continue to July 11th, 2022.
Mr. Urban.
Question for Charlie. What difference is it if we just open the public hearing on July 11th, or is this a matter of protocol where we really need to open it tonight?
It was noticed.
Okay, so we're following this. We're following
Yes,
this. Okay.
we're following the statutory requirements. So
Okay.
in order to move it, it would be a
We have
motion
to open the public.
continue.
All right, well, now I moved it. We open the public hearing and continue to
But it's
July
already
11th.
open, so now you have to do is continue it.
Well, no, it says open the public hearing.
Well,
Oh, you're saying open because
it's-
it's on the docket.
It's already open.
Oh, well, heck, then it's just you're asking. for
Just a motion,
continuance.
then, a motion to.
We're not
continue.
opening the public hearing. We're already open.
I apologize.
We're
my-
just going to motion to continue. I'll motion to continue to July 11th.
Commissioner Urban, do we have a second? Second by Commissioner Tufano. All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. This application will be continued to July 11th. Move on to item E, zoning application 2022-761, Elizabeth Lane Elementary School to change the existing conditions on that certain lot designated as Elizabeth Lane Elementary School and further designated as tax parcel 227-03491 to extend the current sunset provisions on 9 mobile units to August 2023.
Thank you, Mayor. Next slide. So as stated, this is Elizabeth Lane Elementary at 121 Elizabeth Lane. So Wednesday of last week, we actually did receive an update to their request to extend it for an additional 5 years instead of the requested 1 year. So that extension would be until August 1st, 2027. Next slide. Just a quick background on the site. So for the mobile classrooms, there was an initial boundary set in place back in 1995. In 2001, that boundary was extended to allow for what you see today. However, back in 2001, when that was initially extended, it was put with a 1-year sunset provision. So after 1 year, the boundary would reset back to that original 1995 boundary. At some point, unknown to me or staff, or the rest of staff that we have right now, that was just overlooked for the next 15 or so years. So starting in 2016 through 2019, CMS started coming back annually to update the sunset provision. The last time we took action on this was in 2020, at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. At that point, they had requested a 2-year extension rather than the 1-year extension. Next slide. Again, this is just showing a different angle of the mobile classrooms. And then we have the site plan showing the entire site and the boundaries. I have a zoomed in one on the next slide. Right, so the green line is the original 1995 boundary. Within that boundary, there are 8 learning cottages and 1 mobile restroom. And the red boundary highlights the one that was extended back in 2001. There are 7 learning cottages outside of that green line inside the red boundary. So if this were to cease being continued and it reverted back to the 1995 original boundary, 7 of the mobile classrooms would need to be removed from the site. Next slide. Again, they are requesting a 5-year extension. And this is really, right now CMS is doing some work. They're looking at potentially installing or looking for some bond funding to do system-wide improvements to the school system. And the applicant can highlight the specifics of that. I think in generally, staff would support extending an extension to some degree outside the typical 1 year. You know, this is a little bit different than our typical conditional rezonings in the fact that we do have a sunset provision in place. So we know there's always the potential for it to come back on some type of annual basis, or at least semi-consistent basis. Public Works did make the comment they would like to see the queuing study that was done in 2019 extended, and for the double stacking traffic patterns for drop off and pickup to continue on site. That finishes the staff memo or staff report update.
Are there any questions for Mr. Holman? All right, Mr. Lucaria, would you like to, we had a very, very interesting and good meeting with you a while back, and maybe you could update the public and the rest of the board on what we discussed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, Madam Manager, members of the commission. It's great to be with you this evening. So yes, I'm going to try not to go too far in depth into what we've talked about with the capital plan, but just to start on the micro, pull back to the macro, and let the board know that I am more than happy to come back and have a specific session to talk through both our capital plan for the district and also for Matthews specifically. I didn't even touch on Crown Point because I didn't want to be too indulgent or take too much personal privilege, but just understand that there are several things that are in the works that we think will help address current and future capacity issues here in the town of Matthews. And so you can see this was actually created here by our student planning folks. Next slide, please. And so, you know, you can see here number of students, but the mobile classrooms, the portable classrooms themselves, they're not so much tied to students as they're tied to teachers, and especially at an elementary school level. Other than if the student is at a special, which is media center, art, PE, or they're at lunch or they're at recess, they're generally with the same teacher in the same room for the entire day. And so we have to accommodate each of those teachers, each of those full classroom teachers with a teaching space. And the fire marshal doesn't really like us to hold school in the hallway. So then you start looking at, if you don't have these portables available, we need to take over media centers. We need to do awful things like we did at Eastover a few years ago, where we leveled the floor in the auditorium and turned it into a kindergarten zoo. We had about 8 or 10 kindergarten classrooms in what had been an auditorium, trying to manage overcapacity situation there. So we like having the flexibility and the ability to use the portables to manage the teacher utilization of the campus, which is driven by students, but it's not necessarily one-to-one, and it does change year to year. Obviously, with the onset of COVID, everything's been kind of silly related to both attendance and projections. We know that there were a whole lot of folks who kept their rising kindergartners out of school. So we're waiting to see what happens when all of those students return to us and how large an upcoming kindergarten class we'll see in the fall. And other changes as people decide maybe they didn't like that fact that CMS wasn't in person for a period of time and did something else, but now realize, I'd like to come home. And of course, you're always welcome. This is your neighborhood school. Next slide, please. So as was alluded to as well, we had planned to open Lansdowne Elementary School's replacement, on-site replacement, last school year, but because of some challenges that we had with permitting process with the city of Charlotte, the Department of Transportation, the school was delayed by a year. So we are on target right now. We're challenged. I can tell you a story about an electrical panel in Juarez, Mexico, some other time, but we are we are on track to deliver that school in August of this year. And when that happens, the boundary change that was already approved to move students from Elizabeth Lane to Lansdowne will happen, which will provide some modicum of relief. But the issue with the mobiles, again, is we can't know for certain how many students are going to show up in the fall. And more importantly, as we're working towards our future plans, there are things that having those portables on site will help us accomplish. Next slide, if you don't mind, Jay. So part of our overarching capital plan, which is gearing up for a bond referendum in November of 2023, starting now, next slide, includes the replacement of Matthews Elementary School, replacement of Crown Point, and addition renovation project at Elizabeth Lane. And so we're starting the draft CNA now. This was presented to MEAC. We've discussed it as well with some of the town officials. We are collecting feedback and information. We will update with new data as we have new 20th day data coming in the fall of this year. And we would look to have a draft CIP in March of next year that would then go to the county commission and the LGC for approval and be placed before the voters in November of 2023. Next slide. So as we're working through this, we're also trying to make sure we know exactly how we're accomplishing each of the projects in that capital plan. So we're doing studies already to determine how things would work. And so with Elizabeth Lane being planned for an addition and a renovation, adding another wing with another series of 10 classrooms to bring us closer to baseline at that facility, and then being able to use that new wing and the portables to help us with the churn, if you will, internally as we renovate the other wings of the school is something we'd like to be able to take advantage of. We're also going to address the entry to the school, the queuing and the stacking. Next slide, please. As we work through the process, you can see about where we would be looking at the new classroom addition to go, sort of completing the circle, if you will, of the school. Next slide, please. And then here's the revised bus lot. And again, we're still working through this, but new pickup, drop off, queuing and stacking lanes that would help ease all of the pressure that we feel on Elizabeth Lane and backing up into Pineville Matthews Road. So we're taking all of that into consideration as we go forward. And you can see the driveway actually goes through where many of those portables are today. So again, our intent would be for those to be able to go away at the time that this delivers. We'll know what we know about the student counts and all of those sorts of things in the future, but we do not think we would have the same sort of reliance. We also want sort of the flexibility, if you will, to relocate the portables around the site as needed, not off the site, but around the site to help us with the churn as well. So don't know that they would have to move, but that's something that we're seeking some flexibility on. And so part of the ask as well is we recognize that, 5 years is a long time. And so we're also saying, we'll see next year what projects are actually on the bond referendum, in what order they're actually going to be funded, and then when we would look to accomplish those. So we're also committing to come back in spring of 2024, this time 2024, and say, okay, after action, this is where we are on the bond. This is what happened with the projects, and maybe the timeline's fine, maybe it's not. We'll know more at that point. But we wanted to be respectful and not ask for something open-ended, recognizing that we're happy to come back and have a conversation as we all know more. Next slide, please. So that is, in sum, our notes. We're just asking for the sunset to extend August 1st, 2027, pending the action by the Board of County Commissioners, the LGC, and the general public in approving that general obligation bond referendum in November 2023. Next slide, please. So also just something that we've also shared, again, is the opportunity for the on-site replacement of Matthews Elementary School. We're very excited about the opportunity there and how that can work to further support all of the efforts for the town's front door, if you will, and continue to be a key part of the infrastructure of downtown Matthews. And so as we're moving through this process, there are all sorts of avenues for folks to engage us. There are plenty of things to talk about. We want your feedback. We want feedback from the residents. We want feedback from staff and students as well. Next slide, please. And that's my cell phone number, my email, so you can get me 24/7 if you'd like. Wouldn't be the first time. And I am more than happy to take any questions or comments at this time about this. Thank you.
Let me just say that when we had our meeting, it was probably the most exciting meeting I've had since I've been an elected official, and that's been for about a decade now. So I'm not real happy. And let it be known that, we've been sunsetting these trailers for a couple decades now. So maybe we need a different word. But I think in light of this is contingent on a bond, a very substantial bond, general obligation bond passing. But if it does, it's going to mean great things for the town of Matthews. It's the most exciting thing for our public school system ever that I can think of. In addition, what wasn't mentioned, although Providence is in Charlotte, a lot of our kids go to Providence. Providence High School is also going to be rebuilt. So just a total makeover for all of our schools. So I think in good faith, I support moving this. It's kind of silly to come back every year and do the same song and dance. I told Dennis that I attended South Meck High School. I graduated in 1981, few years ago. Didn't have gray hair then. And I took some classes in portable classrooms, and I was told they were temporary, and they're still there, not the same ones, but they're still portable classrooms at South Meck, that they were supposed to be there for a couple of years when I was in school there. But I think this is a good thing. It's reasonable, and in good faith, we should support this request. Commissioner Tufano.
When was the last bond issue for Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools?
It was in 2017, and with escalation, it was just north of $1 billion. I think a little bit of context, the 2007 bond referendum that built Rocky River and Huff High Schools, we paid $52 million for each of those high schools. We're building a high school at Johnston Road right now, the same project, and it's $130 million. So
did that 2017 bond issue pass?
It did, sir.
Okay. I'm a little reluctant to give 5 years. I would prefer just to give enough to cover the bond issue to determine whether or not it's going to be passed or not. If it doesn't pass, then we're stuck with another 3 years of having these on site. So I'd like to make a recommendation, or at least have a discussion about possibly reducing that sunset provision to just pass the bond referendum.
They did commit to coming back in 24. So
remember, this is the public hearing. You can make this on decision night.
Right.
Correct.
Where it falls, but you can certainly voice your opinion tonight during the public hearing, but you would not be engaging in.
Correct.
Tonight.
Commissioner Urban.
Dennis, I really appreciate you coming here tonight and outlining these things. I will tell you, this is the first presentation I've seen that hasn't gotten defensive or gotten anybody on the dais with their hair standing up the back of their head. and I want to work with you, there's no doubt about it. But I think to Commissioner Trufano's point, I'm not worried about the bond timing, but you said 2024. I'm taking a different tact that there'll be another board in place. And I think they have every right to air their grievances or vet this possibility as well. So I would say, since we're in 2022, we've been doing a 2-year sunset. We go to the 2024 in 2 years and look at that. And that allows another board to come on. And I'm sure they'd be looking forward to your same presentation or a better presentation. But I think that's a fair way to make sure we don't leapfrog a board and they feel out in left field should something go awry. But I feel so much better tonight after hearing you. It's been 12 years listening, and to John's point, over and over and over and again, and there was degradation of the actual trailers. It was coming to fisticuffs about just repairing the decking, kids were getting splinters, the whole 9 yards, security. There was no reason for that. So I do appreciate it, but I will make the motion. I'd say we do 2024 2-year extension like we've done in the past.
Well, again, this is a public hearing, so we're not making any motions.
You're right.
Member Pro Tem McCool.
How old are the cottages that are on site?
Of varying vintages, if you will, sir.
Because I'm pretty sure I'm showing my age here. I know for a fact I've taken a class in one of these cottages not terribly long ago.
It was like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Last year. But even when I was in school, feels like it's been 15, 16 years now, they were not in the best shape. Even I can remember. So is there any plans to like replace any of the older ones or do upgrades to them?
We certainly evaluate and refurb as we can. The problem is, quite frankly, the maintenance dollars don't go as far as we would like them to go. You've, I'm sure, watched as an innocent bystander with the conversations that are happening between the Board of Education and the Board of County Commissioners. The Board of Education does not have funding authority. It's not up to them to determine how much, is available to them and when for capital and for operating and those sorts of things. And so much of the focus is on protecting the classrooms and the people that are in the classrooms doing that work. And so sometimes that means that the classroom itself is maybe not as pretty as we would like it to be, but the key is what happens inside of it.
I think another point that wasn't made in previous presentations on this topic was how many others CMS schools have these portable trailers. Can you tell us how many do? It's about all of them, I think.
It's pretty close to all. There are probably a handful that don't have any at all, and another handful that have a few that are not in operation, because again, there's a tremendous cost associated with relocating them, and you have to have a place to take them as well. So they can only travel at night. They have magic permits that are attached to them, and you're looking at close to $100,000 a unit to relocate. And so again, that comes down to also making responsible decisions with our limited resources.
Well, when you want to remove these, we'll have a big bonfire and get your.
I'll be the first one there.
Mr. Tufano.
I'd like to talk about the security of these learning cottages, otherwise known as trailers. Can you help me if they're going to stay in place? What kind of, especially in today's environment, what kind of security do we have for each of these?
So the classrooms themselves are secured from the exterior. They're key access. They are set up in such a way, generally speaking. I'm not going to go into specifics of Elizabeth Lane for a variety of reasons, but generally speaking, we make sure that there are multiple accessible paths of travels, both for ingress and for egress in the event that students have to leave for whatever reason, but they've also got very, very secure doors, and there's access directly off, as you can see here, specifically the end of a wing and things that allow for connections and able to bring students into the school or off the campus as need be, depending, because there are all sorts of issues, fires, things like that can happen on a campus as well. So we take all of that into consideration. We use something called crime prevention through environmental design, or CPTED, that goes into citing all of our schools and how we provide access to and through each of our schools and across our sites. And so all of that is baked in, and not all of it is necessarily obvious to the naked eye. There are also security cameras and other measures like that. Again, without wanting to go into a whole lot of specific detail on the microphone, but we do the best we can with the situation that we have at hand.
Thank you.
Would anybody on the planning board like to ask a question or make a comment?
Yeah, with the learning cottages in the future, so they're gonna go away after the renovations or the new buildings are completed, correct?
That's our plan. So we would pick up 10 brick and mortar classrooms, which would then substitute for 10 of those portables right off the bat. And then again, we have opportunities with the new Matthews, with the new Crown Point, to make some boundary adjustments and do some other things as well to help make sure that we're right sizing that campus as much as possible. Again, so much of my job, and I've said this in a lot of other forums, is I'm still looking in a rearview mirror, so I really don't need a crystal ball, but it's really, really hard to know what's going to ultimately play out relative to birth rates and net in-migration and, you know, townhome developments that get approved and all of those other sorts of things, right? So, you know, we manage, but, you know, it's the door's open to everybody who's in that attendance boundary, and we have to take them, we have to love them, we have to teach them.
So yeah, okay, great. So the anticipation isn't not to have learning cottages in the future, but used within the brick and mortar school that's there.
Absolutely. And we'd like to be out of the portables business across the board.
All right, Maureen, do we have anybody else on the planning board that's indicating they'd like to ask a question? If anybody in the audience would like to make a comment or ask a question? Dennis, when you put your phone number up there, it was like a subliminal message. It was on the screen for like 1.5 seconds. So I wrote down 704-201. What are the last 4 digits?
3419.
3419. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Make sure I get that and lock it into my phone.
Absolutely.
But we really appreciate the open and honest communication we're having and the transparency, and it's much improved over the previous times, as Commissioner Urban said. So we really appreciate that.
Thank you. I'm grateful for the opportunity to reset. So.
Give the opportunity now, anybody in the Zoom audience that wants to make a comment, they can use the raise hand feature. Does anybody indicated they'd like to make a comment from our thousands that are watching tonight? This application will be heard by the planning board on June 28th and come back to the Board of Commissioners on July 11th. Okay. So thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Entertain a motion to reconvene our regular meeting.
Second.
A motion from Commissioner Whitley, a second from Mayor Pro Tem McCool. All in favor? All opposed? Let's take a 10-minute hygiene break and come back at approximately 9:25, thereabouts. All right, let's reconvene the meeting and we'll start with item 12A, receive the planning board report from Mr. Foster.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Board of Commissioners. I have the planning board report from our meeting of May 24th, 2022. One item for town board action this evening, zoning application 2022-760, Match Point Sports text amendment to amend the text of the United Development Ordinance, section 155-506-15CB2 to read, they shall have no more than 24 courts total, including tennis, pickleball, platform tennis, and I just found out during our last meeting, it's padel tennis courts. I've been calling it paddle all this time. The members of the planning board reviewed the requested text amendment and recommended approval after finding that only the petitioner's property would be impacted by the change in text and that any new request would require approval by the Board of Commissioners. The request was found to be consistent with the Matthews land use plan because it will provide for a greater number and variety of courts for commercial indoor and outdoor tennis and racket clubs and associated swimming pools. The request was found to be reasonable in that it provided for the opportunity for the growing popularity of racket sports of different types. Are there any questions?
Any questions?
Short report this evening.
Very short. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you.
Let's move on to 12B1. And before we start, I'd like to ask Commissioner Urban to recuse himself from the next three items.
According to Charlie last time, he said that I stand in recusal, so I'm good to go. Yeah, no, you saw him already. It's been going from day one. Again? Well, we'll just make this a common thing then. All right, so let's look at B, it'd be B1, B2, and B3. You need to be recused from that because all those properties are adjacent to my property.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Urban stands recused. We'll go on to the first one, public improvement variance for Flagship Healthcare. Mr. Will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a public improvement variance, and the request is to have a variance from section 155-707 of the Unified Development Ordinance and other applicable provisions of the UDO to eliminate the requirement to construct and install a planting strip and sidewalk along the site's frontages on Team Road and Matthews Township Parkway. I had some exhibits that were attached to your package, but recently, actually, as recent as this morning, the applicant has requested a continuation in order to get more information. The recommended motion from staff was to deny the public improvement variance, but at this time, I'd like the applicant to come up and explain why they need more time.
Mr. Carmichael, I was looking for you over there and you changed sides on me.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the Board of Commissioners. So this request has a pretty long history. We appreciate everybody's patience. It's connected with the rezoning request for the site on 51 for the medical office building that was recommended for approval by the planning board, but the planning board did not recommend approval of the public improvement variance. And at the planning board meeting, we said we were working with staff on some options, and we have been. And in fact, there are 3 options that were proposed. And unfortunately, the planning staff has not supported any of the options. And so to meet the ordinance along 51 would require the approval and permits from NCDEQ and the Army Corps of Engineers. And according to Flagship's wetlands consultant, there's no assurance that you would get such approvals. The agencies would require justification why that, because what would happen here is to do it, you're going to have to extend a culvert over the existing stream. We've talked to you about the topography along 51. So to meet the ordinance, you're going to cut a half-acre trees and you're going to extend a culvert over an existing stream. NCDOT will not allow you to construct a retaining wall to accommodate the planting strip and the sidewalks. And the only option, if you want to do it, is to extend the culvert over the stream, which would require approval from the Army Corps of Engineers. But they're going to have to know that there's no reasonable, viable alternative to this issue. If there is a viable alternative, then they're not going to grant permission to impact the stream. So Thorn Passage with Flagship has a meeting tomorrow with the folks from the NCDEQ to talk about this. But we've got a PowerPoint that shows the options. You know, if we don't get a deferral, then we're prepared to go through with the hearing tonight. But it's not, this isn't a situation where it's not convenient. We're requesting this variance because it's not convenient or there's a cost to it. It's because there's some environmental and topographic elements to it. And part of it would require approval from a third party. And we need to understand that a little more, to be honest with you.
Okay. Would anyone care to make a motion? Asking for a continuance or a deferral?
Let's call them continuance. That way we don't mind settle.
I think as they are attempting to gather more information, a continuance is a reasonable request. Would anyone care to make that motion?
I would like to make that motion that we continue to July the 11th. Is that right? Is that a good date?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Whitley, a second from Commissioner Garner. Any further discussion? And is this for item 1 and 2?
Yes, sir.
Can we do one motion? Okay, so this is for the first, the public improvement variance. All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously with Commissioner Urban being recused. I think we want a similar motion for the next item, zoning application 2021-742 flagship.
And I'll second that as well.
Okay, again, we have Commissioner Whitley continuing zoning application 2021-742 to July 11th, a second from Commissioner Garner. All in favor? All opposed? That again passes unanimously with Commissioner Urban sitting in recusal. Move on to item 3, zoning application 2021-743 Hoyle to change the zoning from R20, B1, I1, and I1CD to B1CD and BHCD on those certain properties also currently designated as 633 Sam Newell Road, 641 Sam Newell Road, and 720 Lyle Cruz Circle, and further being designated as tax parcels 193-245-11, 193-245-08, and a portion of 193-245-24. Mr. Will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this is a proposed rezoning from R20, B1, I1, I1CD to just straight B1CD. And that is to accommodate a maximum 4,000 square foot building that'll be used for financial institution and another non-residential use at a maximum of 9,000 square feet. Now, I know in my memo, it says 9,200. And I would request that the board hear me out for a second. In the TIA, the traffic impact analysis, the building was only 9,000 square feet. So we have requested that the applicant match that in their rezoning request. Additionally, there is an additional note that has been added to the rezoning petition, or the rezoning plan. And that is to clarify that audible pedestrian signals will be installed on the intersections where this property is located. Before it was accessible and it should be audible. So those are 2 minor changes to site plan. I have checked to make sure that everything is copacetic. Other than that, staff does recommend a motion to approve this zoning petition 2021-743 with the conditions that and I forgot to mention, they're getting rid of the BH. Remember, this was going to be a split zone site because there was a drive-through that was proposed. So BH allows for the drive-through, but there's no drive-through now. There's a drive-up ATM, but that is allowed in B1. So at staff's request, they rezoned to just strictly B1 instead of having BH for the, you never know what could come in a BH Chick-fil-A drive-through or something like that. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I know you like Chick-fil-A. Anyway, the conditions that the entire site be zoned B1. And we also request that acceptable architectural elevations for both buildings be brought back to the Board of Commissioners for future approval. And it is loading. There's the site plan. I believe this is the one that says 92, but I will provide clerk with the one that is 9,000. And also there's a few elevations showing Chase Bank and then some conceptual elevations showing the 9,000 square foot non-residential building. So that being said, it's kind of a long-winded way of saying staff recommends approval with the certain conditions that the entire site be zoned B1, the 9,000 square foot building and the 4,000 square foot building be capped at those square footages, and that architectural elevations for both buildings be brought back to the Board of Commissioners for future approval.
Any questions for Mr. Will?
Is the developer going to make a presentation?
Got a huddle. John, are you going to make a presentation?
Really brief, Mr. Mayor. I have a PowerPoint. I just want to give you a little context. So when we came before you several months ago, and thanks again, I've been thanking you for your patience every time I've come up here, but I mean it. We had the Chase Bank, and then we had another building that was 4,200 square feet, I believe. Next slide. You can go to the site plan, Jay. That was the original site plan. It had a Panera and a Chase, and the Panera had a drive-through, and there was some concern about that. Next slide. Next, that's the old Chase elevations that were part of the rezoning. Next slide. And those are the Panera elevations. Next slide. And now planning wanted us to have more of a, to make sure that building, and we went to the planning board, and the planning board did recommend approval, but they did so with the understanding that we were going to work with planning and come up with a design that the planning department felt was acceptable. And we're happy that that's occurred. And by the way, I've got Lat Purser with me, and then Mr. Hoyle, the property owner, is here as well. I apologize, Latin, Mr. Hoyle. But what we've got now is a 9,000 square foot building that does not have a drive-through. It's going to be a nice masonry building that's going to be a retail restaurant, some sort of office building. It could be multi-tenant. And then you've got the Chase Bank on the corner. So it's going to create a nice streetscape along 51. And next slide, Jay. These are the new Chase elevations. They've got brick. Next slide. I'm going to go through these quickly because we're fine with the condition that we come back to the board for elevation approval. Next slide. And these are just precedent architectural images. So if you're inclined to approve it, and we hope that you are, we would come back for elevation approval. I will say there was one thing in the staff report that there's a leftover into the site from 51. And I think the staff is recommending that be eliminated. But that's vitally important, and I may ask Lat to speak to that, to the viability of the development. And it's something that's part of the traffic study, and it was approved by the Department of Transportation. And when I say the leftover, I mean this right here. And so that's really important for both developments. Well, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. If you don't, that's fine. Okay. But other than that, I think we're on all fours with staff, and we appreciate their efforts to work with us to come up with a solution.
I will make a comment. A quick Google search will show that Chase banks are, there's plain Jane Chase banks, and there's wow, that's a Chase bank, and we want one of the wow ones. So,
Okay.
we don't want the plain ones. I know there's some really not very attractive. So I know you're coming back for elevation approval. Susan, do you have any comments on the leftover 51 piece there? And I assume that if we approve this, we're approving that as well.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Of course, I always have comments, so thank you for calling me forward. So my concern about the leftover, where's that pointer? I need that prior page. Thanks. What I read from NCDOT with respect to this left in was that the left turn lanes onto Sam Newell needed to be extended all the way back to that left turn in, which means that all of our landscaping in this area is obliterated. And Mr. Purser and I had some candid conversations about that, because I know we pay a contractor to maintain that nice landscaping in the median. Kathy English worked so hard to keep all that nice landscaping and a boulevard feel for 51. But the fact of the matter is, this landscaping here hasn't really done very well. And so I suppose you could say I was convinced that maybe losing this sliver of median wasn't exactly so detrimental to the town. And I know that the Pursers did work really hard in negotiating with that directional crossover with NCDOT. So I think it's okay if you want to approve it. Maybe you want to talk about what landscaping could be had here, but with NCDOT, maybe you'll get 3-inch grass instead of 1-inch grass. I don't know. Who knows these days?
Well, Susan, we are truly blessed to have you on our staff, because you have all the answers for us. So we appreciate that.
I try. Thank you.
Like the backstory, so we can make an informed decision. Commissioner Whitley?
Yeah. Show me where the drive-through for the bank is for the teller.
Do you see those 3 cars, Commissioner Whitley, right there? That's the ATM.
Okay. All right. I thought I saw it once before. I couldn't remember where it was. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, or motions? Commissioner Hoover?
Yeah, I was contacted by Greenway Management, who has currently, hired an attorney over Man Drive being a private road. Has this issue been settled yet?
It's Vic as the owner, that's part of it. Sorry, this is Lat Purser. And we actually are the ownership, I think, next to Greenway Management. If they're, John, is Greenway the condos that you're part of? So we own the other building right across it, and there's an existing maintenance agreement between probably 4 different parcels as it sits, 5 actually, now that I'm thinking about it, whereby if there's traffic coming through, or if the preceding rezoning got approved, they would come into it as well. But all the owners that share Man Drive have a shared maintenance agreement there. So there's an existing agreement on how that infrastructure works and where those costs are borne.
Yeah, because according to the Matthews, oh gosh, I lost my thing. But we know that when it comes to private roads, the property owners are responsible for the maintenance.
That's
So,
correct.
I just know, I think this needs to be corrected. Also, Lyle's Crew, is that right? Lyle's Crew?
Yes.
Lyle's Crew Road is also a private road. Who owns Fee Simple?
I think the ownership actually, does the ownership go to the median? Yeah, so depending on the side of the street, but the property owners go to the center line of the street. But Lyles Cruise and Man Drive are both in that same maintenance agreement. So all groups are under that same maintenance agreement where as repairs come about, everybody pays their pro rata share.
Okay, so if this is approved and being a private drive, these other business owners that you say are owning center of Cruise Lyle, they have no issue with paying themselves for the maintenance on the road.
I mean, for the access you're going to receive, and I'm as a member of this agreement, the ability to come out to 51 if there were backup on Sam Newell or anything. And, we're not sharing in, I mean, the fair thing to do is that if we were being asked to, if this owner, David, was being asked to participate in Lyle Cruise and Man Drive maintenance, wouldn't they also be asked to participate in his maintenance? And so what we've just decided is he does his, we do our, that's the way I've looked at it from the ownership perspective of Cruise business park or business.
Okay, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I wonder if these people really understand the financial burden that could be placed on them.
There's,
by cars coming coming into the.
I guess
what you're proposing.
there's 4 different buildings on Cruise Drive that currently use those same roads and don't participate in the maintenance agreement. And I would ask why those people aren't being brought into the same discussion.
This site has 2 access points, one on Sam Newell and one on 51.
Mm-hmm.
So it's gonna have adequate access. It would have a left in, a right out, and then it would have access here as well. There may be, and the good thing is that I think people were concerned about a drive-through restaurant, kind of the trip generation from that, but that's gone away from the site. Connectivity is what a town wants. And so you see connectivity between adjacent property owners, whether it's private roads or public roads. Anybody coming from up here can come down through this private property as well and get to 51 to avoid the lights. So the connectivity, I think, is what generally communities want to see.
Well, yeah, I don't have a problem with connectivity.
Right.
It's just the fact that because Lyles Cruise is also a privately owned road, you're going to have businesses. When you get wear and tear on that road, it's going to have to be repaired.
Yeah.
And that's not the town's responsibility.
No,
And I
that's
just want to make sure these business owners are also aware, this is a bill you're going to have to flip to fix.
Yeah.
this
And
road.
as a member of that, I'm fully aware.
You're one of the business owners.
As a business
he's one of the
owner, as a
business owners.
partner in that, I'm on Man Drive. I have a building that's there as well.
Mhm.
I'm fully aware. And as I look at this, I feel like we're taking advantage of them because my owners are far more likely to use this and use the services in the restaurant and all that and put traffic here. Whereas I feel like all the retail traffic, the only circumstance that would drive a retail or a customer over to Lyle Cruise and out Cruise or Man Drive would be the person looking to make a left on Sam Newell, which is probably a very limited number of people when you consider it. Most people, or Highway 51 just carries a lot more traffic.
Mhm.
And so if you're making a right on Sam Newell, there's no reason to go back. If you're going any which way on 51, there's no reason to cut back through the neighborhood. So I have more of a feeling that the neighborhood's going to have more use of this. John, you may give your thoughts here too, but I would think the neighborhood or the current owners on Lyle Cruise and Man Drive are getting a lot more benefit than potentially what they're bearing in cost.
Well, evidently they are not happy because they have hired an attorney for this issue.
I'd say I'm one of them.
Well, I know,
Yeah.
I hear that, but I mean, I don't know if you're
And we've
part of
had
that,
roughly-
but they got an attorney. 'cause-
We've had conversations. They asked for it. We shared the existing agreement that sets
Yeah.
out how the maintenance will be handled. And that was all
One
the
of the
discussion
questions,
we
I don't know,
had.
this might be for Charlie or whoever. Is that,
Excuse me, Ms. Hoover, I think Mr. Buckley wants to make a
I'm
comment.
just going to say that issue of the private relationship, that has nothing to do with the zoning.
Okay, but I mean, okay, but a question I've gotten asked from Greenway Management is, I'm not sure who to exactly ask this question to, if it's you, Mr. Buckley, or just the board in general. Can the town take over Man Drive?
I don't think
If
we
it was
want to.
dedicated, if it was dedicated, then it would have to be brought up to standards, but it can always take over a street.
Right. I didn't know if it was, I mean, they had asked me that, and
But
I
according
just
to
told them,
these
I can't
plans,
answer that.
Yeah, but according to the plans, they're private, so it's not being dedicated to the public. So we're not going to reach out and grab it.
Right. But I mean, they're reaching out to us to see if the town is interested.
Well,
I don't know how
then it
all
would,
this works.
if they want all that dedicated to the town, then all the owners of the property, the underlying fee, and all the easement owners would have to join together to ask that.
Okay, okay. He had just asked me, I told him I can't answer
Okay.
that question.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'd just like to make a comment. We can't adequately pave the roads we have, so I don't know why we would take on more.
Thank you.
Does that answer you have your question, Judge? You're good?
So
Are there any other questions? I'm sorry, John. did you
Well,
have-
I know they've had conversations, Commissioner Hoover. I haven't been part of them. Mr. Bassett has, because the flagship site is here next to Lyles Cruz, and they're part of that agreement. This site doesn't abut Man Drive, but clearly I can't look you in the eye and tell you it's not possible that somebody wouldn't go through the flagship site to Lyles Cruz and demand. That could certainly happen from time to time, just as the reverse could happen. They could come through this site to 51.
Yeah, but not sure if I remember correctly, the other, where the other project, the flagship,
It's right here.
it's going to be, you're going to have connection to that area.
That's right. That's what I'm
So, you know,
saying.
you'll have people cutting through to get through.
They could. I don't
Yeah.
think it'd be a great number, but it could also happen in the reverse.
Yeah, I
It-
just know I've heard some, from what there's just some, I know your office is in there.
No, mine.
Just hearing, I mean, you know, person, but, you know, just, they're not happy from what I'm hearing. That's why I'm asking this. I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
And that's why I asked, well, if they've hired an attorney, then
yeah, and I don't know
you
anything
know, I
about
can't
that.
answer any questions because I mean, I don't know. All I know is what I'm hearing.
If they hired an attorney, this was really the first we've heard. We had a call with them. We shared all the existing agreements between the parties. Like I said, there's parties along Cruz and along Team Drive that are not part of this agreement, and they use the roads, and it was never a lawsuit against them. So this is the first, you know, I'm hearing of a lawsuit.
Well, yeah, right. I understand, but I just, you know, I can only tell you what I'm being
Yeah.
told.
I get it.
So, okay.
Mr. Garner.
I'd like to ask the petitioner a question. You know, we always talk about Matthews running out of space. I'm curious why a one-story building was what you went with instead of going up and maybe using the space a little more fully.
Yeah, a little bit of parking in an effort to engage the street and create more street frontage. You know, one story will allow us to get more street frontage engaging that street. Whereas if you go to keep the parking adequate, you would have had to have shrunk the building, which would have only put more parking lot up on 51, which was going against what the ordinance wanted. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And also, do you have a landscape plan?
It's not on there. And with the revised plan, I don't think we have that yet. I
Because
can
one of the-
bring that back with architectural to the Board of Commissioners.
Okay, I would like to see that because I know it's kind of silly to say, but Walgreens across the street has really nice landscaping and has elevated that corner. And I hope that these buildings.
The
can do
original
same.
plan may indicate it, and you can see the winding multi-use path, and that was an attempt to save a lot of the existing trees that were there. But with this latest modification and effort to get it in, you are correct, and we do need to go and get that done.
And I was involved in the Walgreens. That's in the overlay. Jay, were you here then? Okay, so, but that's in a 51 overlay district, and so there are specific planning requirements too. But I mean, we could, if you're inclined to do it, we could bring that a condition, include that with the. You'd have to do that anyway, but we could certainly
be part of the elevation approval.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like that. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but that would be important to
Yeah,
me.
I think that's, yeah, great. And in maybe some ways mitigate the planning strip that we're going to lose. That's in the
Certainly.
road there. Mr. Whitley.
I'd like to make a motion.
Thank you, sir. Oh my gosh.
I'd like to make a motion to 2021-743 for approval. It has been found consistent with Matthew's land use plan as following consistent with change zoning consistent with the land use plan because it contains development that is consistent with the surrounding quarter. Reasonable change in zoning is reasonable in that you add more resident use to Highway 51 corridor.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Whitley, a second from Commissioner Garner. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Commissioner, thank you, gentlemen. Commissioner Urban, you're welcome to unrecuse yourself. So with Commissioner Urban rejoining the meeting, we'll go on to item 4, zoning application 2022-747 Williams Creek to change the zoning from R15 to RVS on that certain property designated as 24 Williams Road and further being designated as tax parcel 193-531-0607 and 08. Mr. Will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In this rezoning, the applicant proposes to change the property from R15 single family to RVS and SRN for the purpose of constructing 65 housing units of varied styles, some quadplexes, some triplexes, and single family dwelling units. There are a number of comments that were raised at the public hearing, including privacy and safety of an adjoining property owner who maintains horses on her property, create the possibility for a more diverse type of housing. Community open space should be more centralized for ease of access and safety. And architectural elevations should be revised to reflect various housing styles. In response to these comments, the applicant has submitted a revised site plan, which actually has been a number of revised site plans that we've gone through. So this is the latest and greatest that I will show you. The revised community open space is located front and center, closer to Williams Road. Added 10-foot sidewalks around and through the community open space for ease of access. Additional parking was added around the community open space. They committed to securing the Honeycutt property by providing fencing along lots 8 through 15 and 33 through 38. Separation distance from the Honeycutt homestead to existing developments and the proposed developments is approximately 220 feet. They are proposing a diversity of proposed products, duplex, triplex, quad, small and large single family homes. Created additional street buffer on Williams Road. And they split the proposed property development into RVS and SRN zonings in order to, well, because the property is larger than 15 acres. Additionally, the developer is committed to a number of road improvements, which are noted in the conditional plan. And at their, as Mr. Foster said, at their April 26th meeting, Planning Board recommended approval of the zoning application 2022-747 to the Board of Commissioners. Now I want to show you guys a little bit about what the difference is. Yeah, there we go, Jay. Thank you. This is the original plan. This was submitted up with the application in January. Again, 65 units, some large lots, some small lots. Then the next slide shows revised plan. This is part 1 of their revised plan submitted for approval. So you can see there are attached units, single family dwelling units, and also the large open space in the middle. The next slide is just the southern portion that has been submitted for approval. This connects to Danfield Road and is, looks like about a dozen single family lots. So to show you just the difference, obviously the lot configuration has changed. The park configuration has changed. The old park was down here, new park in the middle. This is tree safe. There's also a slightly wider access to the Honeycutt property, which is here zoned R15. This was where it was about 10 feet narrower there. And then there are two connections to Williams Road. At this time, staff does recommend a motion to approve application 2022-747 as it has been found consistent with the land use plan. And, but I would be happy to answer any questions that the board may have at this time.
Any questions for Mr. Will? Mr. Garner?
What is the new count of units on this?
65.
It was 65 and it's still 65?
Yes, ma'am.
And are there elevations of the quads and triplexes?
Oh, yes, there are, but I'm afraid I did. Oh, I did include them in my staff report. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. I screwed up. Okay. Those are the elevations that have been provided.
Is that one not the same from the other? Are we?
They are very similar.
And is the applicant is going to speak, or I have some questions about that for the applicant as well.
Second time I got a puncher's chance. So these are the elevations we had in from the previous rezoning because this was a continuance of that. So these held over, and we shared some for the initial on the new Hayden. We hadn't gotten feedback on these fully yet, and so we used some that could be potential for the other one. But they're the one repeating is in the middle. There's some repeating with that wood garage door you're mentioning in the middle left, and then in the middle right as far as some single family. I know we talk about a lot of things of the economies and how do we create value and how do we create savings, and it's an interesting dynamic to try and take the price of land, the price of development up architecture and save on costs. So, we're happy to make, like they talked in the previous hearing, a condition of the rezoning, working through the elevations and again, a workshop to work through that and get some feedback other than just throwing up pictures and then trying to recreate, what may pass. But we're happy to go through some direction. The items on the bottom and the items on the top are all specific to this development.
I continue with my.
Sure. Go ahead.
So I guess when I first said, I'd like to see some quads and triplexes, that the hope was that you could come up with a way to integrate some more affordable units into this property. But from what I'm seeing, just from this visual example, then the price is really not changing on any of these units.
I think initially when we started, we had talked being in the low 400s, getting into the 5s and 6s, depending on the size of the single family towards the southern part of the neighborhood. We've approached this with some value that we think we can get into, again, the high 300s, and that may not sound affordable, but if I showed you the math to it, to create homes in 300s is a difficult venture in today's economy. So, we're looking to do that with this multifamily and create that, but also at the same respect, we're hearing create something unique and create something Matthews and create something with architectural feel and create a dynamic. And if we pare all that down and take it all off, then we're in a different conversation of these don't pass. So we're looking at it and saying, creating some affordability, which may be the high 300s. versus everybody else being the mid 400s. That may not seem significant, but a $50,000 delta in affordability is a big difference. And we're creating that. And our past developments have proven to, even our tan field, have been under the market. Our rice, we're still working through engineering on after quite a bit of time, but we'll be under that value. And we provide affordable housing in the 25, 30 developments we have in Charlotte and surrounding. We're typically under market value in that. And we believe in that, but we've got to put architectural standards to it too.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
You say you want to create at Matthews. Answer this honestly for me. Is that cut and paste used from the previous development? Have you used that in other communities, that those two in the middle?
Those were initially on this. We use them on the new.
That's not the question. I'm asking, have you used that in other communities and other that you've built? Or those?
That one that on the left is something we built in Cotswold that we thought would transfer over well.
So you didn't create it to be specifically Matthews, as you said. So I feel there's some
sorry,
disagreement.
I don't mean to miscommunicate that, but we thought it would fit to Matthews and some of the architecture that they had with the wood doors and the dormers and the different roof lines. We thought it would be something that you haven't seen in townhomes here that would look nice and look good for the community.
Yes, I do not appreciate saying that we created this for Matthews and you've used it in other communities. That's not creating it for Matthews.
Understand.
I know we had Ms. Callie present a petition regarding this, specifically about the egress and ingress. And I've asked Susan if you could, once again, our fountain of knowledge here, if you could maybe address some of the concerns that came up in the petition or talk about the ingress and egress from this proposed neighborhood.
Would you please go back to, do we have the site plan? Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to comment on the petition that was submitted. I think when I pulled up the site plan that's on our website, I can see how there was some confusion. There's some items in the traffic study that didn't get translated onto this document. And so I'd like to specifically address those. And my recommendation is to, if you're going to approve it, to make sure that these are in the rezoning notes. The first one being that the petitioner has committed to installing a traffic signal at Sam Newell and Williams Road. With that traffic signal also comes some road widening for Sam Newell Road in the form of left turn lanes. So there'll be a left turn lane from southbound. So Sam Newell is somewhere over here by the ceiling. So left turn lane to come into Williams Road, as well as a left turn lane coming out of Williams Road onto Sam Newell at the traffic signal. So that's the first point. Their traffic study says if you just do these turn lanes, it's fine. But at the request of staff, the petitioner has agreed to actually install the signal as well. Here you can kind of tiny see little left turn lanes actually on Williams Road into Dunwood Hills and onto this new public street, as well as a left turn lane from Williams Road into Tanfield Extension. So there are additional traffic control measures here to help alleviate traffic. You're not going to get stuck behind someone who's turning left onto Tanfield, that they will get their own exclusive left turn lane. We are trying to work with DOT to get a pedestrian refuge here to help facilitate a crossing here for people to be able to use the sidewalk on the north side to come down and be able to access Rice Park and the retail on Northeast Parkway, depending on how far their walk shed is. Let me check my notes again. So left turn lanes on Williams Road into the development and into Dunwood Hills. If you recall, not the previous version, but the previous version, NCDOT had actually asked that there be a median constructed because the access was over here, offset from Dunwood Hills. And NCDOT said, well, you got to restrict all the turning movements here because they're going to conflict with each other. And only with the alignment of the road with Dunwood Hills was the petitioner able to get this intersection returned to full movement. There was a comment about all the additional developments happening, specifically the Tennyson development. When we scoped the criteria for a traffic study, we look at approved developments in the area that are under construction, but no one lives there yet. And there's a methodology that the traffic consultant uses to apply, say, okay, there's going to be X number of homes, it's going to generate this amount of trips. And they did that for this. They included the Tennyson development as if it was fully developed and added that traffic into the traffic study to make sure it was accounted for in the analysis. Does that cover any unanswered questions that you might have from the public comments about access?
Could you specifically maybe address the suggestion that it be egress and ingress be on Rice Road?
So my understanding is the recommendation is to have both of these cut off so that there's no access to Williams Road, and the access only be down here, Page to the south. Rice Road is somewhere here in the carpet where Tanfield and Rice Road connect. Connectivity, we know, it's been proven that connectivity is beneficial for traffic, for pedestrians, for bicyclists, for communities. And so the staff does support connecting Tanfield to Williams Road, and even this additional little connection, because it does provide for that full movement and the turn lanes at Williams Road. Having more connections disperses traffic to give people more choices on how to get in and out. Will the residents here use Rice Road? Yes, they will. They will use Rice Road. So we're not saying all these people are only going to this intersection with Dunwood Hills, but they would probably use, depending on where if they're coming from Idlewild, they would use this first entrance unless maybe they lived here. And they maybe from Idlewild, maybe they would use Rice Road, or maybe if they were coming to the park. So this connection does benefit all the communities on Rice Road, Williams Road, to get to Rice Road if there's some destinations on Rice Road, like I mentioned previously, the park, or even further down Tanfield to get to Northeast Parkway.
So you would anticipate cut through traffic through here?
I would anticipate that the community would use Tanfield for neighborhood connectivity. Cut through that you're talking about would be someone's on Sam Newell Road, says, you know what, I'm sick of being on Sam Newell. They turn on Rice, they turn up Tanfield, and then they turn on Williams and they get to where they're going. That's probably not going to happen. The community, the neighbors would use that to improve their connectivity and their access. But as far as pulling traffic off Sam Newell and off Idlewild Road, I wouldn't anticipate that happening. Someone may come up Sam Newell, come on Rice, come through Tanfield if they were trying to get over to Idlewild Road, but they've got to come up to come back to do that. They would just take Rice over like they're currently doing to connect through Tanfield to get to Williams, to get to Idlewild. Would be a bit of a stretch, I would think.
Thank you, Susan. Any other questions?
One of the public comments or during the community meeting was asking about a crosswalk across Sam Newell, and since the petitioner is putting it in. So is that part of the signalized intersection agreement?
At Sam Newell? Signals are required. Yes, we would require crosswalks across Williams Road. Across Sam Newell would be difficult because there's no sidewalk on the other side yet.
I think that's what they were asking about, is access to that multi-use path.
Right, when it comes, right? So we would have to, whoever gets there first gets to put in, or whoever gets there last gets to put in the crosswalk, because we don't want to put a crosswalk into grass and make it look like there's a place you can go when you're walking through high grass. So whether we do it as part of our sidewalk project or they do it as part of their project, it's just going to depend on when the multi-use path shows up.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions, comments, or motions? Commissioner Hoover.
Yeah, I just want to say, I went out and on Sunday and just rode around the town of Matthews and just looking, at the charm of our town. And I just really love when you ride through roads and you've got wooded areas and the mature trees and all that. And then when I rode down Sam Newell, it's just really crazy with the homes and the construction. And when you pull up the Polaris 3G, you just see, you can kind of see, you know, what's there. And I don't know, I really question if this is what we want in Matthews. For me, honestly, I don't like it. And that's just me. But I just think when we're, like in Renee, what she had said, Commissioner Gardner rather, we have a lot coming out, and we have to think of how this is going to affect everybody in this area, traffic and everything. And then what we had presented tonight, you know, but for me, I just think it's a little too much. It's just not what for me, it's not what I think fits into Matthews.
If I could have a second, thank you. As far as density though, when we've created this is roughly 21 acres at R15. The 65 units that we've proposed would be the same by right, but I think we mentioned before, now we're accommodating for stormwater and roads and parks and green space. So in that development, we took some notes from the last meeting we were at and create a big buffer and a tree buffer to come to the main road. I know some of these ladies were here from the neighborhood across. We've created even a wider buffer than they currently have for their community, keeping a tree line there. So as you drive by, I know you referenced Sam Newell, but we're on the Williams side. So different than Tennyson that kind of clear cut the entire neighborhood and just cleared it. And now they're building houses. We've created a tree buffer along. So really coming into the community is the first way you experience the community. So when you come down and you take those left turns off of Williams, you come in, otherwise there's a tree buffer. We then have almost a 2-acre park in the middle. We've also created buffers on the sides, buffers to Miss Honeycutt's property, and additional buffers coming through with the stormwater, but between the other neighborhoods. We've really tried to centrally focus on this to make it its own community, its own place, its own thing, because these people, as much as anybody, want their own community feel. And we moved that park, recentered that, put in some additional, parking for people to come enjoy. So, we worked hard on this plan to redesign it. And again, the density wise, it fits that R15, but it's based on, the old zoning of this is how you develop land, septic, sewer, septic and well and things like that. We've now accommodated for all the improvements you have to do on a large piece of land. So density wise, we feel we're in the right target, but certainly recognize them. Thanks for your comments.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
I'd like to make a motion that we deny zoning application 2022-747 because it is inconsistent with the land use plan that this location is too distant from the transit corridor to support higher density uses, and it's not reasonable as it will create additional traffic along Williams Road.
We have a motion. We have a second. A motion from Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second from Commissioner Hoover. Is there any further discussion? All in favor to deny this application? Any opposed? Did you vote? Okay, that is denied 6-1.
Thank you.
Sorry, there's no opportunity to comment further. So thank you. Move on to item 5, zoning application 2022-760, text amendment to amend the text of the Unified Development Ordinance, section 155.506.15 CB2 to read, they shall have no more than 24 courts total, including tennis, pickleball, platform tennis, and what did you say it was? Padel? That's the fancy French way of saying it. Tennis courts. Mr. Will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, so Match Point Sports Facilities has requested a text amendment that allows an increase from 10 to 24 courts of various different types of paddle sports. Padel is one of them, which I had to look it up as well. It's a different type of paddleball. And so their request was to allow a more and varied styles of courts within the RI zoning district. This is only applies to RI because this is a it only specifically applies to commercial indoor and outdoor tennis racket clubs and associate with associated swimming pools. So it's a very specific use that this is targeting. Having appropriate buffers and setbacks for the courts to mitigate any noise from the sport was one of the concerns. There is only one impact. There is only one property that this will impact. Any new swim and racket club in the RI zoning district would be considered a conditional rezoning and would have to come to town board for approval as a conditional rezoning plan. At their May 24th meeting, the planning board recommended approval of zoning motion 2022-760 to the Board of Commissioners. Additionally, staff recommends approval of the zoning motion of the UDO text amendment as submitted. Happy to answer any questions that the board may have at this time.
I was driving this past weekend, and I believe I was listening to NPR, and there was a section or presentation regarding paddleball, or I'm sorry, pickleball, as being the fastest growing sport in the United States right now. But one of the things they talked about in this presentation was that there were a lot of complaints about the noise being more frequent than tennis. Yeah, it's you know, because you're so close together, it's boom, 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 boom. And so a lot of nearby neighbors have complained a lot about it. Do we have any information at all about how loud this is going to be?
I do not. I don't know if the petitioner would care to address that.
Sure.
So I'm Bob Robinson, and I'm the owner of Match Point Sports. And the noise issue, as it relates to us, we have 22 or 21.75 acres at Pleasant Plains and 485, and there aren't any neighbors. And I mean, there's nobody close, and it's really not that loud. It would be loud if you were on the court. If you're 50 yards away, you couldn't hear it. So I don't think noise is an issue.
Okay, well, I'll take your word for it, but I live in Ashley Creek across the street. So if it's loud, I'm going to come complaining.
I'll do like the guy before. I'll put my phone number up on the board and you can call me.
No, I mean, this on the radio, they were talking about how it's so desirable and so many people want to play it and why it's popular and it's older folks can play it. I still not even sure I know what pickleball is, but I guess I'll find out sometime. But
well, this will help. I'll make this comment. So we can put 4 pickleball courts on 1 tennis court. So it's a much smaller court, much closer play. And it is the fastest growing sport in the United States today.
yeah, on the radio, they said the pushback they were getting was from tennis players because that was invading their space or whatever. But I understand. And we do get a lot of comments. If Corey was still here, he'd tell us that a lot of our constituents ask for more pickleball courts. So that being said, we have any further comments or motion? Mayor Pro Tem?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve zoning motion 2022-760. It is consistent with the land use plan because it will provide a great number of variety of courts for commercial indoor and outdoor tennis and racket clubs and associated swimming pools. And it is reasonable in that it provides for the opportunity for the growing popularity of racket sports and different types. And I'm sure Hazen will be very happy to hear about this. Maybe in retirement, he'll play there.
Okay, we have a motion from Mayor Pro Tem McCool. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Garner. I do have one question. Do you have any time limitations? Can you stop playing at a certain time at night?
Yes, I think in the restrictions, it's 10 o'clock, I think, and then part of it's the lights are out at 10.
Okay,
So-
very good. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to item 13, the consent agenda. Okay, a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Done it in all these years. It's always been Mr. Whitley. I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the consent agenda 13A through K5. Did that cover it?
That covers it. We have
Second.
Yeah.
a motion from Commissioner Urban, a second by Commissioner Garner. All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We're going to new business. 14A, consider right-of-way purchase for North Ames Street Sidewalk Project. Susan is up again. She's a very popular speaker this evening.
Good evening once again, Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners. Yeah, I've got a lot to say tonight. We let Dana stay home so that you could hear me speak once again. But this shouldn't take much of your time. If you recall, we received CDBG, Community Development Block Grant funds to install a sidewalk on North Ames Street to fill a gap that's going to be happening very soon. We've gotten through the design on that and have determined the needed easements across the two parcels that have frontage on North Ames Street where the sidewalk is going. Those two parcels are owned by the same person, conveniently. And we have been negotiating our easements with that person and have come to an agreement on a price. And so tonight we're asking that you allow manager to enter into an agreement for the needed easements. The easements would be a permanent streetscape easement across the frontage and a temporary construction easement that would expire after 1 year. We also included, if you're looking at the exhibit on your last page, some right-of-way cleanup. The property owner agreed to that as well. Right now it's in the deed that says something real generic like, and whatever rights of way are needed for the road. So we just said, how about we just clean up that parcel line for you, reduce your taxes, keep your parcel developable. He liked that idea. So that's also part of the documents that you see. The next step after this easement acquisition is to advertise the project for construction. We have bid documents ready to go, and we have gotten extra money from CDBG so that we can do some great streetscape improvements. And we'll come back to you again with the bids so that we can hopefully then enter into a contract to get the thing constructed. Right now, we're thinking it's going to be around $200,000 for everything that we want to do, which it's all in the budget. So going back to this financial impact, the amount that we agreed on with the property owner is already in the budget. So we don't need any appropriations tonight because we've already planned for it. Happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Ma'am, I just want to point out that the property is really owned by an LLC. It's not owned by Mr. Halsey.
Thank you.
It's that lady's name, initials Properties LLC is the name of the property.
So the representative of the property owners who we discussed with.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just, for the motion, it ought to be to acquire the right of way from, instead of from Mr. Halsey, it needs to come from the LLC.
Can you go back to the motion?
It's MCH.
Right
There it
there.
is. That's what we put in the agreement.
So instead of saying into the agreement with the property owner, they need to say into agreement with the LLC.
You could, but you referenced both Mr. Halsey as being the owner.
Oh, my apologies.
He's not the owner, that's all I'm saying, just for the record.
The owner's representative,
The owner-
Mr. Halsey.
Owner is MCH Real Estate LLC.
Everyone clear on that?
Noted. We're thankful to MCH Family LLC for agreeing to sell the property for less than its appraised value. So that's nice. Do we have any motions? Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
I'll make a motion to authorize the town manager to enter into an agreement with the property owner of 325 North Ames Street for the permanent and temporary easement for the purposes of constructing, maintaining, and providing permanent public access for streetscape and sidewalk improvements, and to provide compensation to the property owner at 325 North Ames Street in the amount of $10,500 for these easements.
We have a second.
I'll second.
Motion from Mayor Pro Tem McCool, a second from Commissioner Garner. Any further discussion?
Well, for that motion, that's fine, but just so that it's, yes.
All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Susan, for staying with us for a long time tonight. 14B, consider adoption of FY 2022-23 General Fund and Tourism Budget Ordinance, CIP and fee schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. I'm very pleased to have in front of you tonight the FY 23 budget. As you'll recall, you have had some workshops and we held the public hearing at your last meeting. We have not received any comments from the public during that time. So what we have before you tonight is a $28.5 million general fund budget, as well as a $1.6 million tourism fund budget totaling $30.2 million across both funds. Just a quick review of the highlights. Of course, retaining all of our employees, as well as adding 3 additional full-time positions, including the transition of 2 part-time positions to full-time and then 1 completely new position. We do have a 7% cost of living increase for all of our employees that will go into effect in July. This would also transition our volunteer firefighters to part-time employees at a rate of $13 an hour, and we will retain our uncertified volunteers and continue that program. We also will plan to move all of our part-time employees to a minimum of $13 an hour. And just a note, as this board knows, all of those positions will also be evaluated in an upcoming pay and classification study for additional consideration later on in the FY 23 fiscal year. But this at least gets us started in July. This also increases the Town Board of Commissioner salaries to $9,000 annually and includes a variety of investments in public safety equipment, as well as new software that will allow us to improve our efficiency, all while retaining the 29.5-cent tax rate that was established last year. So happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, we look forward to moving forward. Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Hoover.
I just want to verify by us approving this tonight, we're not violating the new general statute or where, you know, if you serve on that board.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yep, everything's been pulled out, so we will look to make those as separate agenda items after the start of the new fiscal year.
Okay.
And it's at that point, if you're on a board that's going to get it, then you have to recuse yourself, but individually. But tonight, everybody gets to vote on this. Good question.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
I'd like to make a motion.
Thank you,
I'd like to
sir.
make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2022-23 General Fund and Tourism Balance Budget Ordinance, CIP and fee schedule as presented.
I'll second.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, a second by Commissioner Garner. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you, Teresa, for hanging around to the bitter end as well. We appreciate that being available for any questions.
Thank you very much.
Now we'll move on to item 14C and dedication of a plaque. I believe this was added at Commissioner Garner's request. So do you want to discuss this a bit?
Yes, when Dave Bland was on the board with us, we voted to put a plaque up in the community center, recognizing the efforts of the Matthews Community Club. The plaque is now up, and so I sent an email and made a phone call to find out if we were going to have a plaque dedication for this to celebrate those individuals in person and thank them for all they've done for Matthews.
So Commissioner Garner brought this to my attention and I thought it deserved discussion of the whole board. Are there any thoughts on this? Mayor Pro Tem McCool?
I'd be in favor of having a dedication. I think it's a good idea.
As would I. So I don't know. We want to make a motion. We'll vote on it.
We just thought- Do I need to vote? Do we need a date for this?
No, I would just say that we're at a date to be determined. We will have some sort of celebration or ceremony to acknowledge that we put this plaque up and maybe ask some of the people that participated to come. See us do it.
I make that motion.
All right, so we have a motion from Commissioner Gardner. We have a second. Second by Mayor Pro Tem McCool. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank
Real
you.
quickly, Mayor, most of you, or some of you may have heard the Happy Times Club here in Matthews. That was a predecessor to the Matthews Club. They were the foundation of this Matthews Community Club. And these were your senior residents, and every one of them were a part of the Happy Times Club. And they were, from the very beginning, seeking to improve the community center. So I just point out, from a historical perspective, the Happy Time Club was really the foundation for the Matthews Community Club.
I probably could find the actual, what the plaque says in my email, but I do know that Ted Kiker was one of the members of the club, and they're,
Yeah, I believe we can contact Mr. Kiker and Cress, Query, and some other folks and gather some of these names together so that we can, maybe sometime in the summer have a ice cream social or something over there. Dedicate the plaque. That'd be nice.
would you like for me to read it so that everybody knows?
Sure, let's read it into the record. Go ahead. What does it say?
The Matthews Community Club, founded by Bill Barnes, Ted Tyker, and Clay Leffler, formed in 1971. Under their visionary leadership, the club created and hosted Stumptown Festival to raise funds to save the building now known as the Matthews Community Center. This plaque honors the Matthews Community Club, a vital link between Matthews' past and future.
Very nice. All right, let's move on to item 15, the mayor's report. I'm going to be very brief tonight, but I just want to say that I encourage everyone, including the elected officials and all of our constituents, everybody that lives in Matthews, to consult our community calendar because we have so many nice things going on. I heard a lot of very favorable reports about the symphony that we had the other night at Stumptown Park. There's a lot of events upcoming for the summer, and just check them out. It's really incredible. I got several people contacted me about the symphony. What a great event that was. So I know that we have bands playing. We're going to have, the food trucks, all this sort of thing. So let's take part in it and enjoy the summer. Go on to item 16, town attorney's report.
No report, Mayor.
Town manager's report.
Just real briefly want to recognize Matthews Fire and EMS firefighter EMT Chris Clark as our 2021 Employee of the Year. I'll email out the little write-up that we did for him. We're changing things up a little bit, trying to be sensitive to the preferences of the employees that receive the Employee of the Year designation, and perhaps not forcing or surprising if that might not be as well received. And so we had a little ceremony last week to recognize him, and his family was able to attend, and it was really nice. So we are thankful and lucky to have him amongst us, and just want to make sure that that is read into the record as our Employee of the Year for last year. COVID slowed everything down, getting that recognized, and before too long, I guess we'll have our 2022 Employee of the Year. But just again, appreciate his work and the effort of all of our employees. Thank you.
So Mr. Clark has no desire to become before this board, because I would love to have him here.
He's a Shire, one of our Shire employees, and he preferred the more private ceremony.
But he could get a photo with me.
We can send you over to fire station too.
That's a real draw for some reason. Okay, let's move on to the next item. We're going to go into closed session. I'd like to call for a motion to go into closed session pursuant to the North Carolina General Statute 143-316.11A5 to discuss acquisition of real property and to include the mayor, board of commissioners, town attorney, town manager, town clerk, and our planning director.
So moved.
Have a second? Motion from Commissioner Urban, a second from Commissioner Whitley. All in favor? All opposed? So we will go into closed